live, Mayor.
All right, we're going to begin today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council for June 9th, 2015. We have a quorum of the council. Councilman DeCiccio, are you on the telephone?
I am, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think we have other council members who will be on their way. We expect to have all of the council members present for today's meeting. Today's meeting is actually a very special meeting. The City Council has the honor of selecting a chief presiding judge for the Phoenix Municipal Court. This City Council only gets to decide the employment of two people within our city system, the Phoenix City Manager and the chief presiding judge of the Phoenix Municipal Court, which I think all of us would agree is the best municipal court in the state of Arizona. We have a long tradition of that. I want to thank, Judge Jeffries over there, who has been in the acting position now for a while. Thank you for doing such an outstanding job in a leadership capacity, leading this Phoenix Municipal Court during this transition period. The order of events for today's policy session, item number 1 is interviews of the 3 candidates for chief presiding judge. Each council member will have the opportunity to ask a question, hopefully the same question of each of the 3 candidates. My understanding is that the candidates that are not appearing before the council are going to be downstairs in a position where they cannot hear the proceedings, see the proceedings, and their cell phones have been confiscated, or smartphones for this purpose, so they will not have the opportunity to avail themselves of the questions in advance. So we'll try to make it, as we should, as fair as possible. So I will take advantage of the chair's prerogative and ask an opening question. Then I'll have each council member ask one question. We're going to go in the order of the district. So District 1, Councilwoman Thelda Williams will be first, and then we'll go in the order of the city council districts. I believe that we worked that out with the chief of staff for the council in advance, so everyone was prepared to that. Council members will be asked no more than one clarifying or follow-up question to their question. We'll obviously ask the applicants to keep their answers as reasonably brief as possible, so that we can get through all 3 interviews, have the opportunity to deliberate among ourselves and make this decision without going all night. If we have to, we will. After all the interviews are complete, I will hand it over to members of the public who want to provide comment. Some members of the public want to comment on individual candidates. Some members of the public want to comment on the process. I think both are appropriate for testimony before this City Council. We'll then go into executive session, as is legally appropriate, to discuss a personnel matter, much like we do when we select a city manager. And then after the executive session is done, we'll come back into public session and see if there is a motion that will be successfully voted on by this City Council. So that is the process under which I propose we move forward here today. And I believe that in advance, the applicants have been informed that we're going to go in alphabetical order for purposes of today's interviews. Before we do so, I just want to see, do any council members have any questions about how I have proposed that we proceed here today? Councilman Nowakowski.
Mayor, there's individuals here that want to talk about the process. Can we actually have them come testify prior to the 3 interviews, so that if they're not here to testify on individuals, just on the process itself, that we can move that to the front of the agenda, please?
The interviews, I don't know how long they're going to take. They might take some time. I assume the idea is to give them the opportunity to speak their mind on the issue, and then they can go back to their jobs or lives if they don't want to stick around. I don't have a problem with that. Does anyone disagree with that recommendation? So I have 3 cards of people that would like to provide testimony as to process. Mr. Campos, Mr. Ortega, Ms. Mendez. Did you want to comment on the process? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, good. It wasn't marked. It wasn't clear. Okay, so with that, I will then have the 3 individuals who want to speak about process come forward. Mr. Campos, Robert Campos, did you wish to testify first? Up to 2 minutes as to process, followed by Mr. Ortega, followed by Ms. Mendez.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just a little background about myself. I'm a licensed attorney. I've been an attorney a little over 26 years. I'm a former Maricopa County prosecutor, former pro tem judge in Scottsdale for 4 years, 2 years in the city of Glendale. I currently am a criminal defense attorney. I have my small little firm. I practice extensively in the city of Phoenix. My observation is that the system has worked very, very well. I think under the current system, the council has picked very good judges, and I'm very proud of the manner in which the system has selected very good candidates. I don't believe that the system is broken. I don't think there is a need for change. One of the things that as attorneys we're very concerned about is the political aspect of the selection of judges. And there's always controversy as to whether or not politics plays in the selection of judges. So far, I think the council and the committees have done an excellent job of selecting good candidates and eliminating politics. So that is my observation. I'm also here to state that I've practiced in front of all the judges who will come before you for many, many years, and I support Judge Kane. I think he's very patient, intelligent, knowledgeable, and a good administrator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campos. Councilman Pastor, you're correct. Because, Mr. Campos, you marked opposed, I assumed you were here to oppose the process. I apologize. And so your support for one particular judge will be duly noted for the record. Is there anyone else here to testify besides Mr. Ortega and Ms. Mendez as to the process? Okay, please fill out a card and submit it unless you did. But Mr. Ortega, you have up to 2 minutes. Oh, you want Ms. Mendez to go first, please? That's perfectly fine. Up to 2 minutes to testify as to the process. Good to see you.
Age before beauty is what they say. All right. Thank you, council members, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today to address the Phoenix judicial selection process with you. My name is Mina Mendez. I'm a retired Maricopa County Superior Court Commissioner. I always tell people after I say that I'm retired, I'm older than I look. I'm not here to talk about any one individual candidate specifically, but I will let you know that I was on the Superior Court bench during the time that Barbara Mandel served as presiding judge there. And in my opinion, and the opinion of others that I know, she was a phenomenal leader for the Superior Court during a time of unprecedented challenges. I also know Judge Cota personally, and she is also a person of great character and an excellent jurist on your court. I want to share with you concerns about how this particular process looks to a lot of younger Latina lawyers and law students. And by way of background information, I did want to share with you that about 12 years ago, I took over the organizing of a Latina mentoring program connected with Los Abogados and started by Mary Murguia in 1992. In this capacity, I've had the opportunity to meet with, work with, and mentor a number of Latina young women who I hope will be included in the next generation of leadership on the bench and in the bar. And I was very happy to see that several of them have appeared today. As a group, we're concerned with the lack of transparency and the message that this sends to young Latina lawyers looking at the judiciary as a possible career path. It's very discouraging. Both of the judges who were excluded from consideration have been participants in the mentoring events and programs that I coordinate, and we know both of them to be exceptionally qualified candidates. We do not know why they did not make the final cut for consideration for appointment as chief judge. I don't want to take anything away from the three finalists, as all three finalists are also exceptionally qualified. We just don't understand why two equally qualified Hispanic women would be excluded. I've often heard of situations like this being dismissed as just politics. It's just politics. But the politics at this point are unacceptable from the perspective of the Latina community. I know some people like to point to the state merit selection system as a model of judicial selection. And I know, Mayor Stanton, that you called the state merit selection process an exemplary process in the letter that you wrote to the Phoenix Judicial Advisory Committee recently. But I would ask you all to consider this about that state merit selection process. In the last 8 years, out of approximately 47 judicial appointments to the Maricopa County Superior Court, only one Latina candidate has been appointed. The last African American judge appointed to that court was more than 12 years ago. There are currently no African American women serving as Superior Court judges in Maricopa County. There are currently no Latina Superior Court commissioners. This is not the result of a lack of interest on the part of younger Latina lawyers, nor is it the result of an inadequate applicant pool. In the merit selection system, we have looked on as qualified women are passed over time and time again. We're deeply concerned by the lack of transparency in this process. When one group receives disparate treatment and is denied notice of whispered backdoor politics and denied an opportunity to be heard, then the entire system is denigrated. The Phoenix City Court enjoys an excellent reputation with the Latina community, and for good reason. But we do not understand what distinguishes the two Latina candidates who were not nominated from the other candidates who were. It looks to many of us as if the process here was not fair and that the candidates were not treated equally. We would urge you to reopen the process so that all qualified applicants have the opportunity to be considered for this important position. Thank you again for letting me be here today to address you all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mendez. Mr. Ortega is next, followed by Art Garcia. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, members of the City Council. My name is Danny Ortega. I'm an attorney here in Phoenix. And let me start by telling you, first of all, that I am not here in any way, shape, or form to oppose any of the candidates that are before you here today. I'm here simply to oppose the process that was used in selection of those candidates. Let me tell you that I had the great opportunity to sit on the Maricopa County Trial Court Commission, and I had the opportunity to review hundreds of applications and go through the process of selecting candidates that would be sent to the governor. And one of the things that disturbed me most about sitting in that position was the blind, cowardly attacks that were made by people who would call on those candidates and wishing to remain anonymous. Well, at the time, it was very simple for me. If you're not willing to come forward and say those things in public, don't bother me. Don't talk to me. I don't need to know. If you're willing to come forward, I'm willing to use your name and tell them what you have to say. I think that the system that is being used now by this city council and by this city encourages exactly those types of attacks. One of the most surprising things that happened, in my opinion, in this process was not to see the names of both Judge Mandel and Judge Cota come before this city council. Why? If you look at their resumes and the paper that's involved here, I think they're equally qualified. So why didn't they make it? Well, I got a few comments about one of the applicants, Judge Mandel in particular, and somebody saying to me, well, you should have seen the number of negative comments that were made about her. And my question is, by whom and about what? There was no answer. It's a secret. Nobody can come forward. Nobody can be heard. She can't defend herself. We can't defend her. Nobody can. I think that makes the system flawed. It makes the process suspect. And more than anything else, in the prior speaker's comments, leads to politics, the kinds of politics that we're experiencing here today. I urge you to please make this process more transparent. I urge you to make it fair. I urge you to get people to come forward if they have anything negative to say about somebody. I would bet that if you reopen this process, that most of those attacks, and you made it transparent, that most of those attacks would disappear. And we could almost name the individuals who made those comments. At the end of the day, all we ask is for fairness. Reopen the process. Start all over. Include the 3 candidates that have already been there. but also give the other two the opportunity to respond to those blind attacks that have been made that were unfair. Please reopen the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ortega. Mr.
Council Mayor?
Councilman DeCiccio,
Just want to ask Mr. Ortega a couple quick questions.
please.
Danny?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hey, quick question. Was there a scorecard put together? I mean, when we do an RFP, which is sometimes, it could be a $5,000 item or a $50,000 item, we always have a scorecard. We have that. Were the judge, not the judges, but the individuals on the committee, were they required, or the staff know this, to have a scorecard on each individual so that they could judge them on different levels and different merits?
Are you talking about the time when I served on the Merit System Commission, Councilman?
Right. Well, yours, or I'm asking staff if they're doing that now.
I'm having a hard time understanding.
Or no, when staff, this is more a question for staff, if I could.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was there a scorecard or a score sheet on each of the individual applicants that the public could literally look at after the fact?
Mr. City Manager, do you want to handle that one?
Ms. Karen Peters is the Deputy City Manager who has been a liaison to the court. She's been intimately involved in the process, so I'll ask Ms. Peters if she will answer the question.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Council, and Councilman DeCiccio. The rules of procedure for the Judicial Selection Advisory Board do not include a requirement for any scorecard as you described.
So the question, I mean, and Danny Ortega and the lady, I can't remember her name, but sorry about that, that brought up earlier was the fact of transparency. I mean, but at some point you got to make a determination where you're going to be landing with these individuals. And I think for some of us, even on the council, for someone like a Barbara Mundell, who ran a much larger court with a lot more judges on it, could not even make it to a final cut, was surprising at the very least. But even without that, I would not, when we even do a simple RFP, we have a scorecard that goes out there that allows the public after the fact to be able to say, okay, here's why these individuals won this bid. So is there anything in writing that came out of this committee, any documentation, anything that the public can look at to see how these individuals were picked?
Ms. Peters.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, those deliberations take place in executive session. The vote on the candidates themselves happen in open session, but there is no documentation that's available. It is all covered by the rules as a part of the executive session discussion. I will add that the rules do include a provision, the JSAB rules, that says no information from an anonymous source shall be considered by any board member or shared with other board members or the board at the interview meeting.
That's a good point, and that's my last point I want to make. Did you ask any of the board members if they had received anything anonymously? Because even though they may not consider it, but it's something that's lodged in their mind if they end up getting more than one comment about somebody. Was that asked of any of the board members if they received anything? And is that something that we can go back and ask them?
Ms. Peters.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mayor. Councilman DeCiccio.
Well, the question is really simple, Karen. Can we go back and ask the board members if they received any comments from outside of the actual deliberations that they had on this? And can they document those individuals that called and gave them information?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, the rules of procedure for the JSAB require that they collect information out in the community. They solicit opinions from the community about each of the candidates that they will be interviewing. They are not at liberty to discuss the source of, if there is a comment that is made by an individual, they have to disclose who it is in the executive session.
So if they had received information from somebody outside of the deliberation, and that information, someone said, hey, look, I just got to tell you, this person, I really didn't like working with them, and here's how bad they were, they would have to, and they would be required to disclose that information, even in executive session? Are they required to do that, Karen?
Just a moment, Councilman. Ms. Peters?
Yes, Councilman DeCiccio, are they required to share? I'm sorry, I was looking at the rules while you were speaking, so if you could just repeat the last part of that comment.
Well, that's a good attorney move on your part for delaying. But the bottom line is this, is that did any of them share any information that they received? Are they required, actually the question, are they required to share information that they received outside of those deliberations from the public in each session?
No, they
so
are
that
not.
Others can hear that.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, they are not required, and in fact, the rules of procedure preclude them from sharing that information.
But so any information that they get from the public, they keep it to themselves. Is that what you're saying? They're not allowed to deliberate and say, "Hey, I've got this information here."
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, if there are letters that come to the JSAB, those are all part of the record. If there are public comments, those are made in open session pursuant to the open meeting law, which the JSAB does observe. But the information that's gathered on the candidates is subject to the confidentiality provisions of the rules.
So in other words, we'll never know what was done. I mean, is this some way this council can actually go back and ask if they received information on the outside on any of the applicants?
Mayor, members of the council, they are governed by the law regarding executive session deliberations, and while we could certainly ask, I believe that they'd be prohibited from responding.
Why would they be prohibited to a council member if we do this in executive session ourselves?
Mayor, members of the council, the Judicial Selection Advisory Board is an independent entity subject to the open meeting law and the executive session law. Their executive sessions are privileged, as are yours, and they are subject to the exact same restrictions that you are.
So, in other words, one, we don't have any public scorecard from anybody, and two, if someone picked up the phone and called them and said, "Hey, so-and-so, I just want to tell you how bad the applicant is," we have no ability to monitor that. And even if you tell somebody they can or cannot, or they cannot use that information, and if it comes from what they would consider to be a credible source, how do you stop subjectivity at that point if there's no scorecard that shows objectivity here? I don't get that, but that's another issue. But at the end of the day, there is some validation here about things being done that are not being able to, where the public is not able to see the actual process and how these individuals are scored. There is a problem with that.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Thank you. Mr. Garcia, you have up to 2 minutes to provide testimony on the process. Good to see you.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name's Arthur Garcia, and I was born in the city of Phoenix. I'm probably one of the few people that were back in 1943. But, and I have been here, except for that time I was in the United States Army in Vietnam, and the time I spent at ASU graduating from the undergraduate school and the College of Law. I actually served a time here as a city public defender back in the days when the county had the city contract for public defending. I also spent some time with the state attorney general as the executive director and chief counsel of the Arizona Civil Rights Division. And I spent my last 26 years of my career as a federal prosecutor. I'm retired now. The other speakers have spoke about the transparency of the system. I'm more concerned with the membership. I don't think the membership reflects the city. And unlike the state system, which I'm quite familiar with because I helped draft the 1992 constitutional amendments to the merit system of the state, the state system has 3 representatives from each county supervisorial district, 2 non-lawyers and a lawyer. And so it's much more diverse and much more representative. The membership of the Judicial Selection Advisory Board does not represent the city. I would recommend that there be 1 member from every district appointed by that district's representative, and that non-lawyers outnumber the lawyers, as in the state system, 2 to 1, or some ratio to that. I think part of the problem here is if the Judicial Selection Advisory Board was more representative and we had confidence in its decision, we wouldn't be here today to say it lacks transparency, since we would be represented in the process, and I don't believe that we were. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia. Those are all the cards I have on the issue of process. As discussed earlier, now we'll move into the interviews for Chief Presiding Judge.
I have one question.
Councilwoman Pastor, please.
So, in the interview process, in the conversation that I was listening to and asked earlier, basically in the JSAB, this is all subjective. This is all a subjective decision. There is no, like in any HR practice or any hiring practice, there is some type of rubric or something to score or look at experience, take the job qualifications and break them down into a matrix, and then have an interview regarding, then having an interview of those that score whatever the score rate is. So my understanding is just subjective.
Ms. Peters.
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, the city code and the rules of procedures are such that the JSAB is to evaluate the candidates based on merit and recommend the most qualified applicants to be interviewed and discussed by the council. There is no rubric, there is no documentation. It is a discussion based on the input that they have received, and they determine whom they would like to put forward.
So what would you consider the most qualified?
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor.
And a presiding judge, because I took the job scope or the non-classified chief presiding judge essential function. So what would be considered the most qualified?
I'm not, Mr. Manager, I'm not sure Ms. Peters is the right person. She's not on the JSAB, so it's, I think if the issue is that's a subjective standard, I think that's a subjective standard. I think
Mayor,
who could disagree that there's subjectivity involved in this selection process, please?
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, I think that is correct, Mayor. There is no definition of what is most qualified. That is left to the wisdom of the collective JSAB in the way that the rules are structured today.
Councilwoman, do you have a follow-up?
Oh, no, I'm just wanting to make it very clear that in this whole process, this is a subjective process. There is no standard or rubric like there is in any HR process to be able then to defend why some candidates were not part of this process or why the 3 candidates are part of the process. There's nothing for any of us sitting here today to have really determined or understood the process because we were unable to read or have any dialogue with anybody regarding it. So I just want to be clear to the public what the process is in this decision.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Well, Mayor, the committee basically doesn't have to share with us any information on why they didn't allow a candidate to move up, and the sessions aren't televised, so it's not open or transparent like our subcommittees or like this process is televised. Is there a reason why that subcommittee is not televised, or that committee is not televised?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, the meetings are open meetings. They are noticed pursuant to the open meeting law, and members of the public are welcome to attend. The meetings take place in a conference room at the municipal court, which does not allow for broadcast.
Is there a reason why we can't have the meetings in our subcommittee hearing rooms where it can actually be televised? So the problem I'm having is I'm supposed to choose a presiding judge for the city of Phoenix, and I'm not sure why the individuals were forwarded to us and other individuals weren't forwarded to us. So if we have the final say I want to make sure I have all the information in front of me and all the data in front of me. And it's kind of wishy-washy when you have three individuals, three of my colleagues, asking this committee to send all names, to forward all names, and without an explanation why they haven't forwarded all 5 names and why those 2 individuals aren't qualified to be a part of this process. That's where I have a problem with this whole proceeding. Is there a reason why we weren't given an explanation why the other 2 were forwarded to consideration?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, the vote itself takes place in open session, and members of the public are welcome to be present for the actual vote, just as members of the public are here to see the final vote that the council takes on decisions it makes after deliberation in executive session. But the discussion in executive session is subject to the law, which requires that it remain confidential.
And just for clarification for the audience, so how many people are actually on the committee itself?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, the Judicial Selection Advisory Board has 7 members.
And those 7 members are appointed by who, or how are they elected to be these members on this committee?
One moment. Mayor, members of the council, the city code provides that there are 2 candidates that are appointed by the courts. So one candidate is designated by the Arizona Supreme Court. One is designated by the Court of Appeals, correct? And then, I can't read that, Dan, I'm sorry. Here it is. Okay, presiding judge of the Superior Court of Maricopa County or his designee. Chief presiding judge of the city court is a non-voting member. An appellate court judge appointed by the Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court. A member of the Maricopa County Bar Association, who is appointed by the mayor from among 3 nominees provided by the association's board of directors. An active member of the State Bar of Arizona, who is appointed by the mayor from among 3 nominees by the State Bar's Board of Governors, and 3 additional public members who are nominated by the mayor and voted on by the city council.
So out of the 7, there's 5 that's appointed by the mayor, right?
All of the appointments are voted on by the city council, but yes, the mayor chooses from among the 2 bar association lists and then has the discretion to nominate an additional 3 public candidates for consideration by the council.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So next on the agenda is the interviews for the chief presiding judge. The first judge to be interviewed is Judge Kevin Kane. So I don't know who is going down to the dungeon to get Judge Kane to bring him up. And make sure those phones are confiscated for the other judges, please. Judge Kane, good to see you. Thank you for going through this very important process. Congratulations to making it this far in the selection process. I don't know if you've been briefed yet, but we're going to give each member of this council the opportunity to ask you a question and then a potential follow-up question. I would politely suggest that you keep your answers as reasonably brief as possible so that they give opportunity for each council member to ask a question and for us to give adequate time to each of the other applicants. I'll be the first one to offer up a question, and then we're going to go in district order. So District 1 will be first through all districts. And as you know, the other applicants, I think they may have been downstairs with you, but they're in an area where they can't see or hear the question, so we'll all be on the same plane. And we've asked each of the council members to ask the same question for each of the applicants. So I will go first and just ask if you have any short opening statement you'd like to make to this council as to why you are seeking this very important position. Up to 2 minutes on that one. How's that?
Thank you. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm honored to be here. And I will tell you, when I started working for the court as a staff attorney on January 2nd, 1995, one of my ultimate career goals was to have the opportunity to lead this court. For 11 and a half years, I was an administrator of the court. I have been legal counsel for 2 presiding judges. I care about the court very much. I care about the city. I live in downtown Phoenix. I moved to the corner of Roosevelt and 2nd Avenue in District 7 back in 2002 when it was just me and my neighbors. And I've seen the city flourish since then. I am a part of the city, believe in the city, and believe that one of the best factors in measuring the quality of the city is how their municipal court functions and interacts with the residents. And for that reason, I feel and then I should mention that since then I was appointed to the court as a judge in 2006. I've been a judge ever since. And I feel I'm very well prepared to lead the court into the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Judge Kane. Councilman Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is pretty much a follow-up on that. The Phoenix Court has received numerous awards for its innovation and its specialty courts. What experience, skills, and/or ideas do you have to enhance the court and continue this trend?
Mayor, Councilwoman Williams, let me start by saying I've been the presiding judge of the homeless court now for several years, once it's officially become the Maricopa County Regional Homeless Court, but I'm proud to say that I was one of the founders of that court back in 2005 when specialty courts were not politically favored. And I want to give some credit to the homeless court that now specialty courts are very popular and quite a focus. And I've learned a lot in developing the homeless court from a court that had just 3 municipal court jurisdictions participating originally to now a true Maricopa County Regional Homeless Court where all 48 limited jurisdiction courts participate. And I'm honored to be the presiding judge of that court. So I know what it takes to make a specialty court or community-based court work, where you bring together community services, hold people accountable, but also provide them treatment and help so that they can improve themselves and their families and ultimately the community. We do have some specialty courts in the courthouse. We have a very well-functioning veterans court. We also have a limited domestic violence court, which I'd like to see increased. We have about 400 domestic violence cases on average filed in our courthouse every month. So it's a significant problem that we need to address. And I think if we can focus services on those who are charged with those offenses more effectively, it will be good for the city. So I want to see that happen. I also want to expand our mental health court. Right now, our mental health court is really just a screening court for those who have competency issues. I'd also like to see us have a substance abuse specialty court. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman, any follow-up? Councilman Waring?
All right, Mayor, I didn't know what the first 2 questions were going to be, and unfortunately, picking third, I figured my question would be innovative, but he's already sort of answered it, but I want to ask the same question to the other 2. So I guess I'll ask you to just be maybe a little more specific. I'm sorry if it seems redundant. So my question was, why specifically did you want this job, and what do you hope to accomplish with it? I know that you already somewhat answered that, but maybe if you can go into maybe a little more detail.
Be happy to. Mayor, Councilman Waring, I think the court is at a crossroads in some ways. First of all, we're dealing with a computer system and a case management system that's a 20th century system. It was built about 20 years ago. I was a participant in the rollout of that system. In fact, helped support it because I wrote the law codes or the law tables for the system. But it was written on an antiquated, well, what is now an antiquated language that needs to be updated. We have a plan to do it, and we have the funds to do it through our court technology fund. And the system itself is very well designed, I'm told by the experts, but it can't interact with modern day applications. So we can't, for example, produce the court forms that are now pre-printed forms. This is something that would be a number one goal of mine, to automate our courtroom operations. And as a judge, I can appreciate how important it is that we be automated. It improves our processing. Instead of filling out, for example, 9 pre-printed forms as a judge for every DUI conviction, we'll have it produced online in the courtroom, which will save money. In Mesa, when they went to paperless in 2011, they saved over $60,000 just in printing. So that would be a major goal.
Thank you.
Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge Kane, what is the #1 challenge facing the Phoenix Municipal Court, and what solutions do you have to address that?
I'm sorry. Is the ringing that's going on, is that a time indication for me? Okay, I'm sorry.
We have one, I apologize. We have one council member who is present by telephone. And if he is in a bad cell area, it may cut off and he has to call back in. That's what's going on. So
I apologize. So I was cutting some of my
You're okay on time.
A little short. Councilman Gates, I apologize. Could you repeat the question to make sure I understood it?
Absolutely. My question is, what is the...
And that's what I'm talking about.
It's actually to cut Bill off.
Yeah, I'm used to that. What is the #1 challenge facing the Phoenix Municipal Court, and what are your solutions if you were to become our presiding judge to tackle that challenge?
Thank you. Mayor Statton and Councilman Gates, in addition to what I said with respect to Councilman Waring's question, in automating the courtroom process, I think one of the other things we could focus on, which would be a #1 goal of mine, is to focus on sentencing alternatives. We can no longer just rely on jail and fines as a solution to hold people accountable for their bad conduct. We do need to hold them accountable. There's no question about it. But there's other options besides just jail and just fines. And part of it, as I said, with respect to the approach with specialty courts, is to combine the services that are already out there in the community, where they have their own funding sources, with individuals who need assistance. Many of the folks we see in the court are there because they have substance abuse problems, anger management problems, or they have financial problems, and we can provide them resources in addition to the standard kinds of punishment to help them become better people. This is what I've done with the homeless court over the years, and this is what I want us to see in every courtroom across the street at the courthouse, and I think we can do it. I know how to do it, and I think my colleagues are committed to doing that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Pastor.
Councilman Gates took my questions, but I think I can, I got it. And they're going to be, one's going to be technical, and then one's going to be a visionary one. So all municipal court systems must deal with collecting delinquent fines. Some cities, in an attempt to collect these debts, allow fines as small as $250 to bloom up to 20 times the original amount through penalty, interest, and surcharges. What is your position as to this process, and how would you collect the delinquent fines? And then once that's done, I would like to know what your vision for the next 10, 15 years to improve the court system.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Pastor, first of all, fines and fees do tend to multiply significantly. Just yesterday in the New York Times, there was an article about how the Judicial Council in California directed limited jurisdiction courts to stop suspending driver's licenses and prohibiting individuals from having their driver's license privileges restored until they paid their fines in full if they were delinquent. I agree with that position. I think that's counterproductive. First of all, many of the people who can't pay the fines are people who don't have the resources to do it. And so when we affect their driver's licenses and their ability, even though we're building on our city public transit system admirably, still, many of the people, especially those who are the most disadvantaged, don't have the benefit of job opportunities along the light rail system or where public transit provides the best services. So we need to figure out a way to hold them accountable. And community service is one of the ways we can do it. The legislature even authorized municipal courts to begin to accept community service in lieu of paying fines on DUIs, which we were prohibited from doing. That becomes effective January 1 of next year. So I think giving people an opportunity to take care of their responsibilities by doing community service, if it's appropriate. And we need to train our judges to be financial analysts in that sense so that they can discern when it's appropriate to allow people to provide community service in lieu of paying the fines. Some of our residents have the benefit of being able to write a check, but many do not. And so I believe in giving alternative ways to allow people to take care of their responsibilities other than that. And as far as in the future, my plan is, first of all, to fast track our modernization of our computer system so we can become paperless in the courtroom as soon as possible, and so we can produce documents in an efficient and effective way that individuals can either access online, or we can provide hard copies for, where the information, the data is inputted once, instead of a judge having to fill out each form in longhand with their face buried in the bench, instead of making eye contact with the individuals where they can have a powerful impact on their lives. And that's my biggest goal in the future. Hopefully it won't take 10 or 15 years to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Valenzuela.
Judge Kane, what role do you believe an effective presiding judge plays in shaping the culture of the judicial system and ensuring the court maintains the highest level of integrity? And can you provide an example that demonstrates your leadership style and how it impacted the people appearing before you in your courtroom and or the judges you have worked with?
Mayor and Vice Mayor, yes. I, first of all, want to tell you that my leadership style is one of an open-door policy for everybody who works in the organization. To me, they are our biggest resource as far as coming up with innovation and new ideas. The people who are line staff, people who work with the public and behind the scenes every day, they know what works best and what doesn't. And so I would want to make sure that anybody in the organization, not ignoring our organizational chart and line of authority, would feel comfortable coming to the presiding judge to tell them their ideas, their issues, their concerns. So I would encourage that. I also would want to be present and be working hard so that everybody knows. And I think I can say this with some confidence, having worked at the court for so long. Anybody who's been there for any amount of time, they respect me and they have confidence in me. And the leader of the organization has to be someone who everyone believes is going to make a decision for the organization that is in the best interest of the organization and not for any other motivation. And so that's my leadership style, and that's what I intend to do as the presiding judge. And it's somewhat of a new kind of leadership style, but everybody knows who knows me well that I work hard and that I have the best interests of the city and the court in mind when I make a decision. And I'll continue to do that if I'm appointed.
Thank you. Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Judge. How are you?
Hi, Councilman. I'm fine, thank you. A little nervous.
Hey, well, don't worry. You'll be fine. You've done this. You've sat at a bench before, so I don't think it'll be a problem. Since we're only allowed to ask only one question, the second most important decision we could ever make. But the question I've got, you've gone and you've done a really good job of talking about the vision and where you want to take the court. So I'll get into a more specific question. Our number one call at the City of Phoenix deals with domestic violence. And it's been an issue that this council has said that they want to make it their number one priority. What specific things will you do, Judge, in order to address domestic violence ending domestic violence and those specific things you're going to be able to do on your court.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I touched on this a little bit, I think, in the answer to Councilwoman Williams' question regarding specialty courts. But as I said, we have an average of about 400 domestic violence cases filed in the court every month. To me, domestic violence presents the most dangerous situation for our community in so many ways, on so many levels. It's the most dangerous call from first responders. It affects not only the perpetrator, but the victim and their families and neighbors. And so I want to see an expansion of our domestic violence court to make it. Right now, our domestic violence court is more driven by our prosecutor's office deciding which cases they want heard, and it's very limited. I think most all of our domestic violence cases can be heard in a court where the judges are specialized in and are provided with the tools to determine what are appropriate conditions of release and have lethality guidelines that they can use to determine what is appropriate as far as holding people responsible and punishment. Some people, it's going to be a one-time incident, perhaps, but other times it's a sign of a problem and a cycle. So we need to train our judges better, and we can start by having judges specialized in a domestic violence court. And again, I think bringing community services to bear and have them be involved in the court process, just as we do in our Veterans Court, to provide people with services and treatment and counseling to deal with anger management. Sometimes the source of the problem has to do with finances, often with substance abuse. All those things can be addressed in these specialty courts, and I want to see that that happens as soon as possible. And it would be one of my major focuses.
Mayor, may I follow up on that?
Yes.
And Judge, just as a quick, those are all good for input-related type of ideas, but I'm looking for more specifics, and I'm looking for an output. I'm trying to get an outcome. So, and I base most of what I do on outcome-based decision-making. So what is the expected outcome? If you're getting 400 cases a month, what is it that you want to have in a year, 2 years, and how are you going to get there?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, you make a good point. Every goal that we have as an organization should be one that we can measure. And with respect to the domestic violence cases, I would like the outcome to be that we have less than 400 cases filed a month. We cut that in half or cut that even further. And so if we measure it and we follow up as to our effectiveness in dealing with those cases, that's what I'm looking for, so that we can, I don't suppose we can eliminate it altogether, but I would like to believe that we can reduce it if we take special attention to those who are involved in domestic violence and deal with it, so that we measure our progress that way.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman Nowakowski?
Hi, Judge Kane. How you doing?
Fine, thank you, Councilman.
Let me tell you, you got a lot of friends out there. We received many, many, many letters.
Don't hold it against me, please.
Oh, not at all. You know what you should do is get a copy of them all so you can remember. You can remind them when you need these favors, right?
I'll have to write thank you notes.
You were appointed as a presiding judge over our homeless courts. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, your budget, how many cases did you handle on a monthly basis? And just want to find out what your experience was like.
Thank you. As I said, I started with the homeless court when it didn't exist. Once it became a county-wide regional homeless court, by authorization, by the way, of the state legislature and the government and the governor in 2011, where the legislature authorized the Superior Court presiding judge to preside over the homeless court, or to supervise the homeless court. I was appointed the presiding judge, but I was involved in the development of that way back in 2005. The good news is The only budget there is now is that the county, with the authorization legislation in 2011, funds one position, the court supervisor who works under my supervision to coordinate the work of all of the limited jurisdiction judges who sit from month to month in the homeless court to preside over the homeless court. Now, the homeless court, as you probably know, takes place at the Cass shelter, the third Tuesday of every month at 1:30 in the afternoon. The idea is we take the court to the homeless folks. And the other good news is that, as I alluded to earlier, what we do is we bring the services to the court. The individuals actually have to enroll in a program with a community service provider. They have to meet all of those obligations. Once they've met those obligations, we put them on the homeless court docket. Their obligations are resolved because what they've done is they put in significant hours of community service, many more hours than we would expect anyone in the regular courtrooms to have to serve. And the interesting thing is, when you think about community service, we often think about picking up trash at the city park, or maybe, I don't know, maybe going to the fire station and helping to clean up the fire station. Most of the focus for community service hours or community restitution, as the legislature would like us to refer to it as, and it makes sense in this context, is that we're restoring individuals, and we give them credit for community restitution hours when they go to a substance abuse counseling program, or they complete an anger management counseling program, or they complete an employment training program, which makes them, as I said, a better person, a better contributor to society. And so that's how the program works. Again, very limited budget, but we have a lot of resources that are brought to bear to make it a success. And we can do this more effectively even in our regular courthouse.
And a follow-up question would be, a lot of people come from all over the country to look at our courts for our best practices that we have, and these specialized courts are those best practices. So seeing that the budget that budget cuts that we're going to have next year are some restraints that we're going to have, how do you feel, or what would you do to continue these specialty courts, and where would you cut those funds to continue those best practices that we have?
Mayor and Councilman Nowakowski, first of all, as I said, I think the specialty courts can progress without significant additional funds. However, I'm very much aware of our budgetary situation and that we anticipate having further challenges next budget year. And I can tell you, I have some ideas that I'm quite positive will result in budgetary savings for the city, starting with jail costs. Jail costs are significant. And our pretrial confinement, I think, can be reduced substantially. For example, we can use ankle bracelet monitoring for many of our pre-adjudicated defendants, where they're not being held in jail for 3, 5, 7 days before we actually get to see them because they couldn't have posted bond initially. And these are many times people who have no resources anyway. So even though we have the authority to assess those jail costs, we often never recover from them. So that is one way to save money. I think another way is to look at our collection process for court obligations that are owing the court. Now, those go way back to 1989. You've probably heard this, so when I tell you the next number, don't be shocked. We don't get rid of those obligations until they're paid in full. But the court is owed over $310 million in outstanding court-ordered obligations. I think we can become more aggressive in our collection processes. When I was the staff attorney, I wrote a proposal for our collection agencies to provide, as part of their collection efforts, our civil collection processes that are available to us in the courts, such as attachment and garnishment For those who have the assets to pay those obligations, we should be aggressive and make them pay them. Now, that doesn't eliminate the opportunity for those who really don't have those resources to come into court and to address a judge to get those adjusted if it seems appropriate. And the last thing I guess I would say is through courtroom operations automation, we can become, as I alluded to earlier, much more efficient and effective by, as I said, saving on printing costs, saving on staff time, and moving hard copy files from the third floor up to the trial divisions, and we can actually get by on less staff. And ultimately, I believe, just as I said in response to Councilman DeCicio's question earlier, if we are effective as judges in helping to change people's lives, not only be a court that provides due process, which we do very well, but also be an agent of change, as I've talked about, we can reduce crime, which is another way to save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Councilwoman Gallego.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of representing District 8, which is home to a significant number of refugees, and that's an area where we have a success story from the court. So when we had a refugee town hall, we actually used the court's translator contract for several African languages because there was no other city department that had that type of translation services. So a success story there. But it's still something we heard that the judicial system is very confusing for many individuals from other countries, the majority of which don't have a judicial system that looks anything like ours. They will be cited for laws they didn't know existed, and then they get hit, as Councilwoman Pastor mentioned, with fees. And so there's the fee for the fine, the court technology enhancement fee, the fair service fee, the time payment fee. It's all very confusing. Many of these individuals have not yet learned English. They lose housing assistance before they have a job. So when we talk about a $125 fee, that can be really, really difficult for folks. They get built up. I think there's been an emphasis on maybe wanting to avoid jail for individuals who are not paying the fees and perhaps unable to do so. So how can we work with our refugee community?
Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, I think we need to have better community outreach to the refugee community, first of all, and I see that as first of all, falling on the responsibility of the presiding judge to go to refugee neighborhood meetings and explain the process so they understand it, and also to let them know that there are options as to how they address any fees or fines that they may be facing. So that they don't feel the fear of even going to court because they're afraid either that they'll be put in jail or they'll be given such burdensome fines that they can't possibly escape from them. So I think community outreach is important. If language is a barrier, we can address that with our court interpreters, but I think community outreach and involvement from judges, and the studies have shown when judges participate in community outreach to explain the judicial system, it lessens the fear and raises the respect from folks who have to deal with that system. So I'd be committed to participate in that and come to any neighborhood meetings that you hold as a councilwoman and address any questions there may be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Follow-up?
Nope, just appreciate that. Because with some of these folks in the refugee community, if you sit there while they're in court, you just want to tell them, no, that's the wrong answer, and can we help? But I realize we're council people, not public defenders, but it's such a confusing system. So
and if I may follow up, I just want to say that judges need to be sensitive to that too, and we can do that by better training with our judges. Thank you.
All right, Your Honor, you have made it through the gauntlet of the nine questions. I don't know if you have a 1 minute or less, maybe closing statement, and then we'll move on to the other applicants.
Thank you. I'll just say that I grew up in southern Arizona. I grew up in Cochise County. I worked with my father, who had a small ranch and a wholesale business. I then went off to school and graduated in international relations and a minor in Spanish. I spent 2 years as a church volunteer in Latin America. I came back and went to law school at the U of A. I then accepted a clerkship for the Supreme Court of New Mexico for Justice William Reardon. And so from the beginning of my judicial career, I've always been interested in court operations. I was one of the youngest lawyers ever appointed to be a justice of the peace in the little town of Hyde Park, Utah, where I was the presiding judge for 3 years. And I've always been interested in good court administration. As I indicated, it's been a career goal of mine to have the opportunity to lead one of the greatest municipal courts we have, and I hope that I have the opportunity to do that and make it even greater than it is. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And I think we're now going to escort Judge Kane back to the dungeon and get the next applicant. Thank you very much.
I'll take my glasses.
Maybe we can delay Karen maybe about 2 or 3 minutes before we get the next applicant, just for a short break. Thank you. Judge Carter Olson will get started. So we're going to go back into the policy session. I think all the council members are present. Councilman DeCiccio, I believe, is on the telephone. So next we will bring before the City Council for an interview for Chief Presiding Judge of Phoenix Municipal Court, Judge Robert Carter Olson, and he is on his way down. Your Honor, thank you for being here. Thank you for applying for this very, very important position and going through the process. Congratulations on getting this far in this very important process. As you know, we're interviewing 3 applicants here today, the full City Council. The process as it's set up is that each of us will ask one question with a possible follow-up question. We'll ask you the same questions that we're going to be asking all of the applicants, so we can get as fair a sample, if you will, from the 3 applicants as possible. We'll ask that you keep your answers as relatively brief as possible. There is no hard clock on this, but about 2 minutes or so per answer to the best of your ability. Obviously, if you have to go longer due to the nature of the question, that's perfectly fine too. I will take the chair's prerogative and take the first question. Then we'll go in order of districts. So district 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up through the 8 districts. So we will begin this process. So first, my question is really, is there an opening statement you'd like to make up to about 2 minutes of information you would like this council to know about why you applied for this very important position?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm grateful to be here today in front of you and to finally meet you face to face. It's also been a pleasure to meet Judge Kane and Mr. Taylor and visit with them downstairs. I've heard good things about both gentlemen, and I know that they're important members of the court. Obviously, today is about qualifications. Who has the credentials to lead this court forward? Who's the optimal candidate? And of course, my hope, humbly, is that you will conclude that that is me. Candidly, I stand before you with a unique background, a set of skills. I've run for election like all of you. I have served a diverse community successfully. I have actually been in 5 countywide elections over a lengthy period of time. I've worked very closely, obviously, with the Board of Supervisors, which is a little bit different, but I understand and respect the role that you all have, the power of the purse, and of course the important role that you play with respect to the judiciary. Additionally, as I'm sure you're aware, I was county attorney for Pinal County for many years. I was 3 times elected county attorney. I think it's fair to say that I was not a status quo county attorney. We really moved the office forward. We went into areas that other county attorneys had not gone in. We improved areas where other county attorneys had gone. We built an award-winning child support unit that had a profound impact in the county. We started a family advocacy center, which I believe was the first in the nation, started by a prosecutor. Additionally, a community justice network where I met in 7 different areas of the county on a quarterly basis to customize our response to make sure we were responsive to the electorate. And in all things in dealing with the Board of Supervisors, I think it is fair to say that I never came to the Board of Supervisors simply asking for resources without coming up with proposals on how to pay for it, how to reprogram my budget, how to create savings, or at a minimum to come up with seed money to get it started to prove concept, not just expecting blank checks. I moved on to the Superior Court, and a little over a year after being seated on the Superior Court as the junior judge on the court, I was unanimously recommended to the Chief Justice McGregor, to be named the presiding judge for the court. And the reason being, the economic times that we were all facing back in 2008, the feeling was that it was most important to have the most experienced administrator, not just judge, and continued through that time period in reorganizing the business model of the court, making it far more efficient. And one of my key approaches is focusing on the system, not just departmental budget, of how do all the pieces fit together and where can we generate the maximum savings and efficiencies and deliver the most cost-effective services to our community. Additionally, just let me quickly add, I'm also married and have 3 children who may still be listening to YouTube since they're all 3 in college at the same time, and maybe they're doing video games in their recess.
All right, thank you. And that noise you heard, we have one council member, Councilman DeCiccio, who is appearing telephonically here today, and depending on where he is in cell phone situation, if he cuts off, then he has to call back in, and it'll make that noise on occasion. So it's only indicative that he's back on the line listening to this session. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. The Phoenix Court has received numerous awards for its innovation and its specialty courts. What experience, skills, and/or ideas do you have to enhance the court and continue this trend?
Well, obviously, I'm Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Williams. I am the external candidate, so obviously I don't have the same direct internal knowledge of the court. I've had to rely on what I've been able to find going online and that sort of thing. And I am aware of the mental health court and the veterans court and some of the work in the homeless area and that sort of thing. I think all of those are great pieces of the puzzle. I think it's important that you have public defender, the prosecutor, and the police also in the same building, although I haven't been able to find the breadcrumbs to know exactly how all of that is working, and specifically the question of whether or not that is optimized. I think that ultimately the question is, to what extent, with all the different stakeholders, is the delivery being optimized? And it's not just what's most efficient for the court, but looking at this from an ecosystem standpoint. For instance, it's not the judge who's necessarily the most expensive resource in the room. If you've got 10 attorneys that are sitting there that are on your payroll as prosecutors or defense attorneys, are we maximizing the delivery of those resources? Obviously, there are other challenges facing the court, both budgetary matters that are facing this board and the case management system that is going to need to be improved. But I think the first question really is the low-hanging fruit, not just to go into new therapeutic areas, but are we maximizing the resources in the way they're currently deployed? And that would be my first point of inquiry.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. Sure. Can you tell us specifically why you applied for this specific position and what specifically you plan to do with it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Waring, the interest is, to be blunt, is that it's my wheelhouse. This is clearly where my strength and my highest and best use is in terms of leading government agencies and specifically the court, and because of my broad background in the criminal justice system as county attorney and working with law enforcement and being the legal advisor to board of supervisors and so on. I think this is an exciting opportunity. I know that this court has a very good reputation. I know that the judiciary has a good reputation. On the other hand, I think like any complex organization, it can be improved. And again, to be blunt, I think that it's fair to say that I'm a very creative person. I don't just accept the bureaucratic status quo for everything to be done as it's always been done. On the other hand, I don't believe in changing things just to change things. And I think what I bring to the table is a record of fiscally conservative management of resources, rethinking the way that business is done, and evaluating whether there's a better way to go about it. And as part of that, not just doing it in an ivory tower, but taking those ideas and vetting them back with the stakeholders and refining those ideas and determining what should be adopted and what ideas should be rejected and move forward. I look back very fondly on my time as a county attorney. I look back very fondly on my time as a judge and as the presiding judge of Pinal County, and I believe that I have the ability to build on all the work that's already been done in past years in your court and bring it to a new and higher level.
Thank you. Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge Olson, obviously recognizing that you're not currently part of our judiciary here, you did talk about doing some research into the Phoenix Municipal Court, and based upon that, what's your perception as the #1 challenge facing our court, and what would any possible solutions to that challenge be?
Again, it's a little bit difficult just to read what I can find in the public domain of the website. Obviously, this board is facing significant budgetary issues in the coming years. I know you're projecting a really difficult year that you're going to have to plan for next year. I'm assuming that an important threshold issue is going to be to identify efficiency, savings, better ways to do business. I know the case management system was developed in-house, and again, the notes I can read online are just that it's a problem. It's going to need to be updated, replaced. I think that that's going to be a significant issue, combined with the fact that the state has implemented its own Ajax case management system. The vendor has gone out of business and raises some questions even in terms of what some of the options are going to be to build that out. So the bottom line is I think that the pressing issue is going to be the budgetary issues. Obviously, my impression is that the court is fulfilling its mission, is doing a good job, is meeting statutory and court rule obligations, is complying with financial obligations, such that obviously when I enter being an outsider, I need to listen, learn, meet with you, meet with city management, meet with the court, and explore what the opportunities will be. In terms of where specifically that should lead me, I don't have the information to conclude yet. But again, in my background, where I've found the low-hanging fruit is frankly in tearing down walls and boundaries between departments and functional areas. I've got a continuing question as whether there are efficiencies to be gained by better synchronizing the activities of more departments by working together in the delivery of the services that are impacted by this, as well as just the fundamental question of whether the maximization is occurring now. I didn't see anywhere, for instance, in your zero balance budgeting any kind of performance goals in terms of case processing, any of that sort of thing. Are you at the optimum level with the number of judges and just in general the operation there? So it's a long-winded answer, and again, I think the best response is to approach it with an open mind and look for creative solutions and meet the needs that this board has for purposes of the court likely doing with less in the future and meeting its mandate.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman Gates. Councilwoman Pastor.
Good afternoon. I have a technical and then I have a visionary one. All municipal courts systems must deal with collecting delinquent fines. Some cities, in attempt to collect those debts, allows fines as small as $250 to bloom up to 20 times the original amount through penalties, interest, surcharges. What is your position as this process, and how would you collect delinquent fines? And then the second question is, what is your vision for the next 10 years to improve the court system?
Okay. In terms of the fines, again, I wasn't able to find specifically what the current systems are that are being in use. For instance, the FAIR system and whether or not various automated systems, things like intercepting tax refunds and that sort of thing, whether that is being employed. I do note that there is a finance office that meets with people on the front end and attempts to enforce. I don't know how far that's going. I don't know to what extent that is integrated with probation processes, whether people are being released from probation with those financial obligations still outstanding. And of course, part of this even becomes some of the more core issues in terms of the fines that are being assessed in the front end, whether they're reasonable dollar amounts, whether they're amounts that realistically can be paid. I mean, there's little point in setting a fine amount that can never be collected and then just throw more public money at trying to enforce that fine obligation. So, simply stated, from what I've found online, I think that good initial steps are being used. I'm not sure that there is maximizing in terms of some of the automated resources that are available, and some of this goes back to the case management system. Some of the notes that I read in the budget materials were things like in the law department re-entering data I believe it was in the charging department. I guess the question is, how many times is the city paying for the same data to be entered in one system after another? Is that happening or is that not happening? And are the systems integrated? So I don't have a good specific answer because I don't really know how far it's gone. In terms of vision for the future, the vision for the future is to have a premier court that delivers great customer service, that maximizes technology, that delivers the services in the way that wastes as little resources as possible, not just public resources, but private resources too. And I mean, it can be little things. What about the ability for telephonic hearings or video hearings? I didn't see anything on the website. Maybe that's being done. I don't know. For instance, I used to do a lot of telephonic hearings. Why pay for it? And of course, part of this is being in Pinal County, attorneys having to drive in both directions and have the parties often incur substantial financial costs just because the judge would rather have them in person than have them on the telephone, whereas a few-minute hearing can be handled much more economically. And the other part of it is, as I mentioned before, where does the court's activities fit into the broader picture, what I call the ecosystem? In other words, obviously you've got the law department, you've got the public defenders and the private attorneys that are involved in the intersection with the court, you've got the police officers, the issue of overtime as officers are waiting there. To what extent has technology been exploited? And some of this even becomes some basic questions on, is the current deployment of all of the resources here in Phoenix in the downtown area, is that the optimum delivery, or there are other solutions, not necessarily other brick and mortar solutions, again, technology or piggybacking on other resources. Just as a final note on that, and maybe just as a sample of the vision I have of the kind of organization, one of my roles as county attorney and also as judge was that my staff, when they received a phone call, they were never to tell somebody that they called the wrong area, it's not their department, we're not the ones that can help them, you need to go find somebody else. Obviously, the staff are much more capable of wading through a bureaucracy and routing people in the right direction. The role I had was that the staff had to attempt to direct them to the right place. If they weren't sure, to make sure the person had their phone number to call them back so that staff could attempt to help them work through the bureaucracy. And I think a fundamental question is, to what extent can the model, the service delivery, the efficiency and technology be deployed to take the court to an entirely new level?
Vice Mayor.
Honor.
Sir.
What role do you believe an effective chief presiding judge plays in shaping the culture of the judicial system and ensuring the court maintains the highest level of integrity? And can you provide an example that demonstrates your leadership style and how it impacted the people appearing before you in your courtroom and or the judges you've worked with?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure that I directly understand the question, but coming at it from a couple of angles. First off, I'm not a presiding judge who's just an administrator. That even though in the past the presiding judges in Pinal County took a substantially reduced caseload because of the administrative duties, and in fairness, part of this was because of the time in which I was presiding judge and all the economic challenges that were facing the county. But I always maintained a full caseload like any other judge judge, and I added the administrative responsibilities on top of that. And additionally, thinking it important that we cut at the top first, recognizing that we were probably going to have layoffs, I also appointed myself court administrator and created vacancy there. So the first part of that becomes that in terms of the delivery, judges by their nature are a difficult resource to manage, as they should be. I mean, how they conduct their business in the courtroom isn't really where the presiding judge fits in. The presiding judge is more of scheduling and organization of the court and that sort of thing. And I think the fact of the matter is that a presiding judge is in a much stronger position to maximize the performance of the whole court when the presiding judge is also doing the work in the trenches, is familiar with the specifics and setting a standard of service delivery in terms of what the presiding judge is doing, and leveraging that for purposes of maximizing the service out of the entire court. Additionally, although the county has moved to merit selection, when I became presiding judge, we weren't on merit selection. Rather, they were the open election of judges. And with merit selection comes what's called judicial performance review. But it was actually something I started immediately after becoming presiding judge, even though we weren't under judicial performance review, we did a sort of an informal judicial performance review, went through the full process. And part of it was to get the feedback to the judges. One of the things you find is that often judges have a hard time getting people to give them constructive feedback. I remember one time when a judge paid me a visit and thought he'd really nailed it on a case, and a few minutes later the attorney that had been in there came by and was griping about the judge, pointing out that the judge hadn't understood anything about the case and had made a terrible mistake, and now was a problem. The thing is, for judges to perform at the highest level and to meet the expectations of the people who are before them, they need feedback like anybody else. And so part of that was that feedback on everything from legal reasoning to demeanor to everything else. And I mean, ultimately, I think the question becomes whether a judge is an individual that you would want either your own dispute or a family member to appear in front of, and attempting to instill in the judiciary just at large the importance of being mindful to that. You know, with judges, they're dealing with cases day in and day out, and it's easy to forget the fact that the person that's appearing to you in front of you may be having the most significant day of their life with the decision that you're only going to be spending a few minutes involved in. And a big part of this is reminding constantly the judges and getting them talking and thinking about those issues. And then just finally, in all the decisions and the programs and everything else, I think rather than just announcing that this is the way we're going to do it, we did it together. I always met with the judges, we vetted it, we went through process. It may be a little bit more cumbersome, but it results in a much smoother implementation and the reduction of error by doing that. Thank you, sir.
Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge, how are you feeling?
Just fine, thank you.
Well, you're doing well. Mine is a more specific question. I think you were able to get a few of the questions from others that talk about long-term of where it is you'd like to see the court go. Mine is more specific oriented, and it's an outcome-based question. And that's, I mentioned this to the previous judge, that everything I look at is based on outcomes. How do you measure it, and then how do you want to see success? The city of Phoenix, our number one call in the city of Phoenix deals with domestic violence. We get about 50,000 calls a year, police calls related to domestic violence. What specific programming or types of policies would you like to see implemented that would help bring an end to domestic violence? The city of Phoenix made this one of its top issues. So where would you take this issue?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I think I heard the question, and the question is just the magnitude of the domestic violence concern in Phoenix, and where I would like to take that issue with respect to the court. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. What specific ideas do you have, policies, procedures, would you like to see implemented in the court?
I mean, candidly, it's important that much of this really requires a coordination with the executive branch, with the prosecutor and and law enforcement. One of the recurring issues that comes up in this is the issue of recanting that occurs later. It's just a natural part, and it's the human drama that people are going through in this situation. And I mean, one of the threshold questions really become to what extent is that being maximized in terms of preserving that evidence on the front end, preserving the evidence on the photographs of injuries and other programs like that. I know that there's a domestic violence court. Domestic violence court is a therapeutic court, really post-conviction, that's effective. Candidly, obviously my jurisdiction was a smaller jurisdiction, and in a smaller jurisdiction, maybe what's sometimes masked in a larger jurisdiction is the sense that when the criminal justice system is done with an offender, the community gets them back. And the question becomes whether or not the community and the situation there has improved as a result of that criminal justice interaction. Candidly, some of the areas where I've seen, I think, the most effect have been in using diversion as an alternative to traditional prosecution. I think, candidly, the threat of prosecution is often a bigger bite than the reality of prosecution. You go through the process, a fine is imposed, it's over, and then sometimes the problem continues and it's not dealt with. Sometimes what's far more effective is keeping it hanging over the person, and that's been done effectively working with law enforcement, because it empowers law enforcement in dealing with those situations, because they know if this person gets in trouble again that they're going to be more empowered to do something, because there's going to be not one charge but two charges, and the first one hasn't been given away, and in fact a recurrence becomes a felony. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question very well, in part because I don't know all the specifics of what's being done right now. But the low-hanging fruit is the maximization of what happens on the front end with law enforcement and the front end with the prosecutor's office. And the next question becomes, to what extent is the court maximizing its response in a couple of ways, both with the domestic violence program, where's that being conducted? Is that places where it's effective to be used and available? But also, is the court accelerating those matters, treating them as priorities, and trying to move those cases forward at the earliest possible moment, perhaps before the recanting has occurred, and that sort of thing. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that to really make a concrete recommendation, I need additional information that's really not available to me through online resources, and based on the statistic that you've mentioned, that would clearly need to be a priority to be looking into that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Judge.
Councilman Nowakowski?
Hi, Judge. How you doing?
Sure. Good, thank you.
On your resume, you talked about how you were the presiding judge during the Great Recession. Tell us a little bit about how you maintained the customer service with the budget that was restrained.
Sort of the, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Nowakowski, the classic of doing better, doing more with less. It was a multi-pronged approach. The first thing was we implemented, it's not a very graceful name, but we implemented the bucket system of assigning judges. The point was to require that to set up the assignment so that every judge had at least one peer, that there was somebody else who had exactly the same assignment that judge, so that from a quantitative standpoint, it was evident what the performance was. And part of this, these are high-performing individuals, but if they don't have a benchmark and they don't have any way to evaluate their performance versus other people when assignments are all unique and an odd mixture of cases, it's difficult to even know how you're doing or whether you've sort of figured out the better mousetrap, the better way, the more efficient protocol to move cases forward. by having every judge have at least one peer, and we had 10 full divisions and elected divisions and 6 staff judges, that by everybody having at least one peer and by providing that documentation to the judges, we actually ended up having much higher level of performance from all the judges. They identified where their performance was deficient relative to a peer and that sort of thing. And it's my understanding that the county, Pinell County, became the first court to finally meet all the performance standards of the Supreme Court for the case processing. And again, it's my understanding it was the first time it was ever done, and it was during the time that our resources were being cut. Another part of this was we established what we called an early disposition court. It's not an entirely novel concept. It was done other places. Bottom line was everybody was under pressure, and we were able to rethink and reprocess the way of handling the cases, and we were able to take a significant percentage of the case flow that was typically taking 10 to 11 hearings to complete the cases, where we were able to get them done typically in 1 or 2 hearings. I mean, we had stories, and again, in the interest of justice, and the question being, you can spend 20 hours defending somebody, but do you spend that 20 hours over the first 2 weeks, or do you spend that 20 hours over the next 12 months while the government is paying for jail time and other issues like that? I mean, we had stories where somebody was committing a new offense in Casa Grande on Thursday and was being sent to prison on the next Wednesday because everybody came together fast, got everything done that needed to be done, and moved these cases through the system. So at the same time, and again, part of this was everybody was under budget pressure, but backlogs that had grown during times when there were more resources, we actually worked through those backlogs. We got the cases done faster. We substantially reduced the indigent defense costs on those cases because it's kind of like credit cards. If you just pay a little bit a month, you're just paying the carrying costs. And likewise, if you just do a little work on the case a month, you're just doing the carrying costs on the cases. You're not moving them towards their resolution. That we were able to, by accelerating that, get dramatic savings. We were saving about $1 million a year in indigent defense costs, and the sheriff was able to close down an entire pod of the county jail because it was the cases were being resolved on average so much more quickly. And again, this is the whole ecosystem concept. You can cut a part of the court budget, but then if you slow down the rest of it, you may actually be spending more public money because of all of the other ancillary costs that are involved. Additionally, on a similar concept, we created a probation and restoration court to try to speed up those cases that could be sped up and to delink the probation violation from the new cases. Additionally, we started a restitution court, and this goes back to one of the questions on collecting outstanding fines and restitution and so on, just for the purpose of maximizing the enforcement on those cases. So the point is we came at it in a multi-prong approach to get our stakeholders and the other players in the system to be reorganized, to handle this, the cases that could and should justly be handled more quickly. We got the judges operating at a higher level of efficiency by having their performance be measurable to each other. We got the feedback from the public and the attorneys in terms of the performance that the judges were doing, and we maximized some of the other ancillary pieces like probation and restitution court. And again, the end result was that we did more with less.
And a follow-up question would be, tell us a little bit about the time that you served in a dual capacity as the presiding judge and court administrator. I thought that was interesting in your resume.
Well, the county presiding judge is required to appoint a court administrator, and so with the Great Recession, there was latitude given to presiding judges in terms of a variety of the mandates, and I satisfied that mandate by appointing myself. Now, to be clear, we had other people. And we had certainly a flatter organization. I think that the organization here is much more hierarchical, which is certainly one of the things I would want to look at. But we had a flatter organization, but there were other key people. My sense was, number one, if we had to lay off people, it was critical that we first cut at the top rather than just cutting in the at the service level. The other part of it was I knew that I was going to need to tear down some of the walls between adult probation and juvenile probation and court security and court administration and so on. And I thought it important that I have my hands directly on those levers of directly interfacing rather than having sort of a buffer between me and those people as we as a court worked out those issues together and figured out who had the resources to solve different parts of the emerging puzzle that kept coming our way. So it was for a variety of reasons. It was for financial savings. It was from a leadership standpoint. I thought it was an important point to make, and from an execution of decisions, I thought it was more effective for me to be directly in that role rather than to have an intermediary.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Gallego.
Thank you. Phoenix is a very diverse city, and I have the pleasure of representing a lot of recently resettled refugees who have come to us from other countries, in my case, many from African countries. The court system is a real success story in many areas. When we did a refugee town hall recently, we actually used the court's translation contract for many of the African languages because nowhere else in the city did we have those services, so the courts are speaking to people maybe the rest of us need to speak to more often. But at the same time, there's still some struggles if you're coming from a country where you don't have anything like what we would call the judicial system. This is a hard transition to begin with, but you often probably aren't familiar with our laws and may run afoul of them. And as Councilwoman Pastor alluded to, once you're in the fee cycle, it can be rough. So there'll be what might seem like a small fee to someone with a job, but if you haven't yet learned English and don't really have a job, $125 plus a technology fee, fair service fee, a time payment fee, and then often they don't pay on time, and then we get non-compliance fees and late fees, and that can really, it's a very confusing system. While you're in the system, it's confusing pleadings and what's going on. How can we help folks navigate this system?
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Gallego, you know, it's an interesting question. With respect to the court, obviously a big stride forward occurred with the language access to the courts. It wasn't too long ago, and it was an issue actually raised with the Department of Justice that was a requirement that the court had to move in that space. And I know that that's something that's even on the website, which points out the language access and so on. I can't say that I've directly dealt with specific immigrant community challenges that you're describing. I will tell you a delegation from Nigeria came to Arizona last year, in 2013, and the Supreme Court asked that we accommodate them, and they came down to our court, and we were able to spend time with them. And one of the things that was discussed is that certainly some immigrants from some countries, when you have to go to court, you don't know if you're ever going to come back. And that's a big part of the story, too. You know, I guess what I would like to say, rather than sort of shooting from the hip in terms of ideas on a problem I really haven't directly explored, again, something I did when I was county attorney was my community justice network. The idea was Pinell County was a big and diverse area. We had areas that were mining towns. We had areas that were essentially migrant labor and farming activity. We had areas that were more part of the East Valley and more urban and so on. And as part of that community justice network, I met with the 7 different areas of the county on a quarterly basis. And the objective was, rather than trying to deliver one-size-fits-all service to the entire jurisdiction, was the fact that to maximize the service delivery to the community meant customizing and tailoring our response to best match the needs of those various communities. And similarly, I guess it begs the question, whether the court is adopting the best sort of middle-of-the-road generic delivery, or whether it's customizing its delivery to some of the special, and obviously in like therapeutic courts, there's some, and veterans court, there's some of that's happening. On the other hand, at least I haven't found anything online about any kind of geographic specialty. But I mean, I think the cornerstones of the point are, number one, having solid language access and whether or not that's already being delivered satisfactorily or not. Two, basic understanding that it's okay to appear in front of a judge and you're not going to disappear if you do. And three, the recurring issue in terms of fines and fees. And again, some of this is a practical issue. I mean, it's easy to set an amount, but then if staff needs to spend all kinds of time and money and an endless quest to collect money that's never going to be collected, I mean, that doesn't really serve anybody's interest. I will tell you with respect to fines and fees, I mean, I think there needs to be balance. I think that to the extent practicable, people that are incurring costs should be bearing those costs rather than the general taxpayer. On the other hand, there are limits to that. And whether some of those fees are getting out of line, I think, is an issue, including just analysis on whether those fees are being collected or not, whether they're productive or whether they're destructive, whether there are other approaches that make more sense. Again, I recognize in smaller jurisdictions there's sometimes a little bit more latitude, but some of this involves the profound question of whether the criminal justice response is maximized by just sort of checking a box, finishing a conviction, and imposing a fine versus some other level of interaction, whether it's diversion or probation or something else, rather than just sometimes taking the simpler path.
Wonderful, thank you. Good questions.
All right, Judge Olson, I wanted to give the opportunity to maybe just a short 1 minute or so closing statement, and then we'll move on to the next applicant. Again, thank you for taking the time to go through this very important process.
Well, I'm sure I've gone too long, and you realize your mistake by now of not setting time limits when you have a judge in front of you. Just first, again, I know this is a hard decision, and it's an important decision. Candidly, I think it's you've got a good thing going with the court. You've got fine people there. Candor, I hope to be working with your other candidates for this position, but it really comes down to you don't know what kind of a judge you're going to get until you put a robe on them. You don't know what kind of an administrator you're going to get until you put that role on them. And you don't really know what kind of a leader you're going to have until you put that responsibility on them and the process for a leader to develop. And again, with humility, I come to you with a unique background. And I haven't mentioned I'm also an Illinois CPA. I have a financial background as well. And between financial background, the county attorney background, the law enforcement interface, working with boards, advising boards, being a judge, being a presiding judge, and building high-performance teams in all those places, both at the county attorney's office and in the court, those were places that we developed productive and effective, efficient, and high-performing service delivery organizations. And I promise you that if this great responsibility is placed in my hands, I promise you my all and my long-term commitment to the city of Phoenix.
Thank you very much, Judge Olson. Thank you for participating in this process and your outstanding public service career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thank you.
And Ms. Peter, I think we'll just move immediately to the next applicant in the interest of time. Come on, probably. All right, Mr. Taylor, good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for participating in this very important process. We appreciate your outstanding career in public service that you bring to the table in this process. As I explained to each of the other applicants, each member of this body will have the opportunity to ask you one question with a possible follow-up question. I would politely suggest that, to the extent possible, you keep your answers as reasonably brief as possible. Due to the nature of some of the questions, it may take longer than 2 minutes, but my polite suggestion is 2 minutes or so for each of the questions. I'll take the advantage of the chair's prerogative and ask the first one. I hope it was explained to you while you were downstairs that I believe that each of the applicants are in a position where they cannot hear this interview or see this interview. I hope that was the case with you. So
that's correct.
And we plan to ask you the same questions that we asked each of the applicants, so the process is as fair as possible. So again, thanks for participating in this process. Without further ado, we'll jump right into questions. And as chair, my first one is really, do you want to make an opening statement? Tell us why you've applied for this position, why you think you're the right person to be to take this very important position within the Phoenix Municipal Court.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you really for the opportunity to be here today. You know, the Phoenix Municipal Court is a nationally known organization, one that's nationally known for excellence. And so it really is an honor to be here today and just to be considered by you to be appointed the chief presiding judge of the Phoenix Municipal Court. Why do I want to be appointed the next chief presiding judge? It's because I believe deeply in the mission of the court. You know, our motto that we make sure that we tell our staff members on a daily basis, day in and day out, is justice through excellence. We are there to make sure that every case that comes in front of the court is timely and fairly resolved, that it is impartially handled, that it's effectively and speedily done so that justice is actually done, because justice denied is not actually justice. I believe in the mission of the court. That's the reason that I came back to Phoenix when I had the opportunity 4 years ago. I had the opportunity at that time to potentially work for Judge Roxanne Song-Ong. I had known her for many years. She was a gem for this community. She remains a gem for this community, even though she's no longer part of the court. And the chance to work with her every day for 3.5 years in leading the court was a singular honor. And I would make that exact same choice all over again. I will tell you that her enthusiasm for the mission of the court and what it can do in this community was infectious. It really was. I think you've seen that. It certainly infected me in the 3.5 years that I worked for her. I believe in this community. I've come back to this community by choice. I'm committed to this community. It's personal to me because I believe that what the court does makes it a better place. It's personal to me because I live here, my wife lives here, my children live here, we work here, we go to school here, our dear friends are here. I want to help make it a better place. In a nutshell, that's why.
Thank you very much. The first council member to ask a question will be Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you. You just touched on something that the Phoenix Court has received numerous awards and has almost global recognition for its innovation in specialty courts. What experience, skills, and or ideas do you have to enhance the court and continue this trend?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilwoman Williams, as you're very well aware, the entire council is, but especially as you sat on the subcommittee from several years ago, the Public Safety Subcommittee. 3 years ago was the conclusion of the Innovations and Efficiency Study done by the National Center for State Courts. Took a deep dive into the municipal court and its operations. It came out and said some wonderful things about the court. One of the suggestions they had 3 years ago were that we look at specialty courts, and we took that very seriously. And I sat down early on in that process along with Judge Jeffrey and Judge Song-Ong, and we talked about a veterans court. You know, the prosecutor's office had been talking about it for some time. I think many of you are familiar with the fantastic work that Patricia George in the prosecutor's office has done. We sat down, we took the advice of the National Center to heart. We designed what Veterans Court would look at, or would look like, how it would operate in conjunction with the parties. And I don't think I need to tell you what a success it's been. You've been able to see that. We used that same model at about the same time period to do something very similar for our mental competency cases. We created mental health dockets, and we found some fantastic success in our ability to very efficiently adjudicate cases where there are some unique aspects and people who have some rather unique difficulties in navigating the court system. We found that it not only made our adjudications much faster than they had been, we also saved a lot of money because we were able to actually connect people with the things that they needed to do rather than tell them, for example, that they needed to go out into the community somewhere up many miles away and show up at a doctor's office. We provided space for them to come do that in the court. And we found that in overwhelmingly better numbers, they were able to come down and do that. That's been a huge success. Let me mention one other, since you're talking specifically about specialty courts. We have, in the last year, as part of our working along with the Domestic Violence Roadmap to Safety, instigated domestic violence review hearing dockets. Again, using the model that we pioneered with the Veterans Court that's been so successful, and we are finding success there as well. We expect to be able to do some expansion on those. The last thing I mention is that I think this has given us the knowledge base that in moving forward on something like a full-blown mental health court, we have the knowledge we need to be able to do that successfully. And now that there are new Supreme Court regulations in place about that, we have an opportunity there to take another population that has some really unique needs and be able to service them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman Waring?
Thank you, and I'll apologize in advance. We did not set up our questions in advance, so I did not know what the first two were going to ask, and in two cases my question was a little redundant, so I apologize, but maybe you could get more specific. So you touched on it already, certainly. Why do you want this specific job, and what do you specifically plan to do should you be selected?
Well, this job, I would say specifically, because Phoenix is very well known and nationally regarded. You know, we start from a position of strength. But part of what has happened is the court has become a bit of a victim of its own success. You know, the current scheduling master calendaring system that we use is about 30 years old. It's the exact same system that I encountered my first day trying a case in this court back in 1996. It was designed perfectly for those times, but the world has moved on around it. Today, especially since 2008, as we have seen fundamental shifts in the size of the cases, of the number of cases being filed in front of the court, and the makeup of what those cases are, the world that we exist in now is, let's say, it has changed enough that our current scheduling system is not optimal. That's got to change, but that's going to be a major change because all of our justice system partners are plugged into that specifically. So that, for example, we have to deal with our relationship with the police department. They're the ones in our basement who actually do our prisoner transfers back and forth to the jail. So it's a matter of understanding what their capacity is to be able to do that. The capacity of the prosecutor's office and their staffing levels to be able to staff courtrooms. The same as with the public defender's office. So changing that scheduling system is a bit like trying to stop the Titanic. It can be done, and we have made changes over the course of the last couple of years, specifically with regard to recognizing that as the caseload has dropped, we have the opportunity to be a little more efficient. Downsizing, if you will, in some areas. We've done some of that. The change I'm talking about is bigger. It's going to be a difficult one, and that's one that I think has to be tackled immediately, and the way that it has to be tackled is that the incredible talent and energy and creativity of the judges and the staff at the court needs to be leveraged. There needs to be a group brought together to say, look, here's the world we live in. Here's how it's changed. Where are we going to go? You take that creativity and expertise, you figure out what those options are, and we'll go from there. I don't want to belabor the point, but I think that's probably one of the most pressing and immediate specific needs for something that would be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Taylor, having served as the court administrator, what would you say is the number one challenge that the Phoenix Municipal Court faces, and what solutions do you have for that challenge?
The number one challenge, I think, going forward is related to what I was just talking about with regard to Mr. Waring's question, and that's structural and budgetary. As we look forward, we are very conscious of the fact that every dollar that we spend in the court comes out of the general fund, that every one of those dollars represents tax dollars, and that those are precious and limited resources. We're very serious about that. We guard that very closely. In the 4 years that I've been there, we have come in under budget every year. And in fact, tomorrow morning we'll be reporting to the Public Safety Subcommittee where we stand. We're currently scheduled to come in at about 5% under our budget this current fiscal year. And that budget has been reduced every year. Those same 5 years have seen us draw down from a staff of over 374 to 279, which will itself again drop come the end of this month in the new fiscal year by another 6 positions. So we've become nimble, we've become smaller. We have to solve the issue of how best to utilize every minute of the court's time, and to do that in the most efficient way possible, and especially the most economically efficient way possible. And the great challenge there is not to do that. We could do that easily at any time with making some changes. The great challenge is to do that without disrupting what is very important service to the public. And that service to the public is that they deserve to know that when a case is filed in the court, it's going to be adjudicated efficiently. It's not something they're going to have to wait on a year and be called down 3 different times to go into a courtroom or a trial that doesn't happen. And so our time to disposition, something that we take very seriously from an administrative standpoint, and something that we track, is something that we want to protect on a daily basis. That's one of the big challenges. And I'm being conscious of the time here, but let me mention 2 more. One of them is that we have an aging legacy case management system. The changeover to a new platform for us that will enable us to take advantage of today's technology is going to be every bit as difficult a challenge for us as the RMS change has been for the police. We have worked with them closely the last couple of years on that process because we're so closely tied, and we have learned a lot from that process. That is an immediate issue that's facing us now, one we're well prepared to tackle, but one we're in the midst of tackling. And the last challenge, I think, and this is probably going to betray a very personal idea here, I think it's relational, in that I think that courts are too often very aloof institutions that seem unconnected to the community. One of the things I think that we can do with the court, and the court should do better at, is more outreach, is more letting people out in the community know who we are and what we do, so that they're not scared of the court as an institution, so that they're not worried that if they come down to the court and they're not a native English speaker, they won't be able to communicate with us. You know, the court system is difficult and complicated for all of us. For those of us who face those kinds of challenges, it's much worse. And I think until we're out in the community, much more than we traditionally have been, they'll continue to feel that way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilwoman Pastor?
I have a technical question and then a visionary question. So, all municipal court systems must deal with collecting delinquent fines. Some cities, in an attempt to collect those fines, allow fines as small as $250 to balloon up to 20 times the original amount through penalties, interest, surcharges. What is your position to this process, and how would you collect delinquent fines? And then the second question is, what's your vision for the next 10 years to improve the court system?
Well, my easy answer to your question about my view of that is it's abhorrent. It's not what we do here in Arizona, because Arizona, we can all be very thankful, is structurally very different than those states that are facing those problems. You know, I can tell you, having spent 2 years in St. Louis prior to coming back here 4 years ago, what you're seeing on the news about the problems in Missouri and the municipal courts and the way that traffic fines are used there to actually fund cities well beyond the court's cost is absolutely true. As I said, I can tell you from personal experience, but you won't get any more details on that. But we are structurally very different. If you look, for example, at those states where they are using systems that balloon small fine payments into large amounts that are owed, they're using things like private probation companies that are actually charging a fee each month for doing nothing more than collecting the court's underlying debt. Sometimes, from what I've seen, those monthly fees can be almost as large as the underlying fine itself. We don't use those here in Arizona. We don't use them at the court. I can tell you that we have an in-house part of our financial division that works very closely with people. When people cannot afford to pay the fines that are imposed on the day they're imposed in the Phoenix Municipal Court, state law says that they can have time to do that. It requires that there is a $20 time payment fee added to that. Beyond that, we work with people. We sit down with people. They have the opportunity to sit with an actual individual who goes over their finances with them, looks at their particular situation in life, what they can afford to pay, and comes up with a mutually agreeable plan for their ability to pay it. And then we manage that. And we manage huge amounts of fine dollars that are brought in that regard, again, calculated towards looking at people's ability to pay. I wish that was perfect. I wish everybody did that. We do try and make it as easy as possible for to do that, but inevitably there are people who will fall off and not pay. At that point in time where we have done everything that we can do to help people be accountable and comply with their obligations, we will turn it over to the private sector. But the private sector uses collection rates that they add in that are much, much less than what you're talking about. So the good news is I don't think we see that as a problem. You asked about 10 years in the future. Let me tell you one thing that I think is hugely important. It's an opportunity that we have now that we have not had in a long time. You know, there are debts that are owed to the court that are simply uncollectible because people don't have the ability to pay, and yet they sit out there and they can create problems for those people with license suspensions, those sorts of things. We have tried in the past as much as we can to use options for those individuals that are willing to do that, that involve community service in lieu of the fines. Now, it's been very limited. It's been very limited because state law has not currently allowed for that in all instances. And in fact, in some instances, has said it specifically can't be. This year, the law changed. The legislature has given more authority for the use of community service. And one of the things I would like to see us take a very close look at over the next few years is how that can be actually leveraged not only for the benefit of the people who otherwise can't pay, but for the benefit of the citizens around us. You know, community service, we use it because of exactly what it is, and I think getting those people engaged in the community is a benefit to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Vice Mayor Valenzuela.
Thank you, Your Honor. What role do you believe an effective chief presiding judge plays in shaping the culture of the court and ensuring the court maintains the highest level of integrity? And can you provide an example that demonstrates your leadership style and how it impacted the people appearing before you in your courtroom and or the judges you've worked with?
Well, I can't give you an example from the courtroom as I simply haven't done that. But I can tell you, from having sat there for 4 years now and watched Judge Song-Ong closely at work, that what the chief presiding judge brings to the table is everything when it comes to what goes on in the court. The level of integrity, the level of professionalism, the level of enthusiasm for what we do, the level of knowledge about the court's mission. That is absolutely dependent on a leader. Not just a title, but a leader, someone who is engaged, someone who takes these things seriously, someone who lets all of the staff and the judges in the court know that they take that seriously. She was that kind of leader. People knew that about her. Now, you asked about an example. I can't give you one from the courtroom, but I will tell you that I have made it my business from the time I got to the court to make sure that the staff in the court know that I know who they are. They know me. They know that I care about them. They know that to the extent I can, I know about their families. I know about their lives. I know what's important to them. I have made it my business from day one there to let them know that what I see as my role as the leader is to make sure that everything about the operation that we do every day is there to support them in providing excellent service. It's there to make sure that their experience is all that it can be. You ask about leadership. It is all about leadership. I'll tell you that my philosophy on leadership is you treat people like their best selves, and the vast majority of the time they will be.
Yeah, Your Honor, I think you answered the question. The question was your courtroom or the judges you have worked with and demonstrated that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman DeCiccio?
Thank you, Mayor. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, sir.
Well, I've got to tell you, you're doing an incredible job up there. I can't see you, but I can hear your responses and specificity that you're answering these questions is fantastic. Thank you. My question is more specific, and you pretty much already addressed it. Deals with domestic violence. It is our #1 police call that we have at the City of Phoenix with domestic violence, over 50,000 calls a year. What specific things would you put in place, policies, procedures, since things that I look at are outcome-based, that would be able to be measurable and be able to provide the results we want to see done in helping prevent domestic violence?
Councilman DeCiccio, that's a great question. You know, I have worked closely for the last several years, specifically with the city's Roadmap to Excellence program when it comes to domestic violence. I have sat on the Systems Reform Subcommittee and worked with other stakeholders as we've looked specifically at what we can do here in Phoenix. We've made some progress. I can tell you that domestic violence is something that I have taken very seriously since I tried domestic violence cases as a prosecutor starting 19 years ago. I spent a couple of years where I was specifically doing that in the prosecutor's office. You know, 19 years later, here we are looking at the court. There has been a long timeline of different approaches, different initiatives, different things that have been tried. The court has some very specific tools that can help. You know, one of the things that we need to make sure that we do, and I was suggesting earlier that outreach is a good idea for us. One of the things that we need to make sure the public is very well aware of is the availability of orders of protection. You know, we're very good at making sure that we are available when people need orders of protection, and that we have an entire section that is devoted to being able to do that for people so that they're in place. There are some issues. We have worked with the domestic violence community on this task force to look at the way in which those are served, ways to make their service more available to people and less difficult for victims if they need to get it done. You know, the police department does a great job. We have worked with them to try and find even some better ways in the ability to do that. I will tell you that all of the justice system partners in the city of Phoenix are committed to that same goal. The prosecutor's office is looking very closely at their diversion programs to find out, with some metrics that are specifically identifiable, how well do they work? What do they do? We are really in the infancy of seeing what we can do with these domestic violence review dockets. They've started small because we took the most egregious cases and made sure that they were there with that kind of judicial review. We're looking to expand. We are hoping that we will find some benefits there when we sit down and look at this. We have talked about things that involve making sure that training is available and that it is actively used. There are several tools that are available, several things that we have done, and I expect that as this is an issue that has been very publicly important in the last couple of years, we will continue to see progress made.
Councilman? All right, thank you very much. Councilman Nowakowski?
Currently, you're the executive court administrator, and you worked alongside with presiding judge Roxanne. What characteristics or things that you would take from the presiding judge that you would emulate now, or what's the best practices of the presiding judge, Roxanne, that you would use?
Mr. Nowakowski, I think the first and foremost one is one that I mentioned a moment ago. She was a people person. The staff at the court absolutely adored her, and the reason they did that is because they knew that she cared. She was not there to just sit in the office every day. She was out, she was seen, she talked to people. They have missed her in the 8.5, 9 months that she's been gone now. I have tried to bring that to my leadership at the court. I'm confident that staff know that I care about them. I don't expect them to adore me the way that they adored her. I wouldn't expect anybody to do that, but I've tried to emulate. You know, I have learned from some masters. Judge Roxanne Song was one of them when it comes to what the chief presiding judge at the Phoenix Municipal Court actually does. You know, she told me early on that when she was appointed 9 years ago, after having served for several years as the assistant presiding judge, that she wanted to keep a bit of a caseload to go with her. She found she simply couldn't. She found she did not have the time because she was absorbed all the time in the business of what the chief presiding judge actually does. Budgeting, as we do it here in the city of Phoenix on a year-round basis, hiring, mentoring, staff development, facilities management, very concerned with the security environment in the court. You know, we have on any given day hundreds of city staffers in the courthouse and hundreds of members of the public. We are a court. We take that security very seriously. But these are all the aspects of what I watched her do and what I did with her for those years that made her very effective. She knew all of these aspects of the operation from top to bottom. She cared about all the aspects of the operation from top to bottom. It was those administrative skills that she had and that she brought from having been the assistant presiding judge for several years that made her so effective at what she did, and it was her personality that really put it over the top. She was a leader.
And what characteristics, a follow-up question here. So what characteristics do you think the judges in our court system should have when it comes to community?
When it comes to community?
Correct.
I think that our judges, like other members of the city and other members of the staff, should be out and should be visible. I mean, community service, I've believed for a long time, is something that, frankly, all of us owe. All of us who are able. We're part of this community. We're not aloof from it. We've been blessed with many, many things. We can give back. I was told from the time I was very small, if you can, you do. And so I think to the extent that we can, we should be out. We should be visible to the community. You know, there should not be people out there that don't know what the court is or that think it's very scary because it's some island over on the side that they don't know anything about because they've never seen it, they've never been there unless they got the very scary traffic ticket or sometimes the very scary jury summons and had to come down. We do our best to make that as painless an experience as possible. But I think that being visible to the community is hugely important.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Gallego.
Thank you. Probably won't be surprised, but I wanted to ask about service to the refugee community. And we have some success stories there. So when we did the refugee town hall in District 8, we used the court's translation contract because it was the only translation contract at the city that covered several of the African languages commonly spoken by refugees. But at the same time, we still do have a ways to go, at least in my opinion, on the fees. If you have been recently resettled to this country, you do not speak English, you have lost your housing assistance, and you probably don't have a 40-hour-a-week job, those fees can add up quickly and they're very confusing. What are all these technology fees? Maybe you get through it and you get probation fees for quite a while that helps you from not stabilizing. And then the court system in general is confusing. There's often people called in breaking laws they didn't know existed. They could come from a country where they don't have a system anything like what we have here. It's scary. I often find myself, in my limited experience, wanting to tell people what is the right answer to a question, because if you didn't grow up anywhere near this system, it is just so foreign. So how can we help the court be accessible to more people, particularly in the refugee community?
Councilwoman Gallego, that's a great question, because the truth is that it is scary, and let's be honest, it's scary to those of us who don't come from a very different cultural background where we're not used to anything like this. And it's scary to those of us who speak English as a native language, because frankly, the language that we use in the court, although English, is itself a strange one. So what can we do to make sure that we're accessible? Let me tell you some of the concrete steps we have taken. 3 years ago, I wrote the court's first language access plan, because one of the things that we wanted to make sure of in conjunction with the administrative office of the courts was that we're absolutely providing language services. Now, we have long at the court been a leader. I'm very proud of the fact that we have a significant number of staff members in the court who are bilingual and speak Spanish on a daily basis. We have an entire section of interpreters who speak Spanish. We've been good at that for a long time. What has been very different in especially the last 10 to 15 years is this almost explosion in the use of lesser used languages. And so we've worked very hard in that section to make sure that we're using every resource available. Now, we can have a great plan, we can have a great section, we can have that accessibility, but if people who come into the court don't know, we have to be able to tell them that. So one of the things that we have been doing the last couple of years, because I told them it was very important and it needed to be part of the plan, was that there should never be an instance when someone comes in front of you, any staff member of the court at any level, whether it's coming through the security at the front desk, whether it is the front information desk, whether it's the customer service booth, or whether it is on the phone when you call. It is our obligation to make sure that we are able to find a way to communicate with that person. All right. But as I talk about outreach, one of the things that I'm not sure that we have been very good at in the past is making sure that that word gets out to the community. That it is a complicated place at times, but it's not a scary place. And it's going to be a place where you'll be able to communicate with us specifically. Now, I think that was the focus of your question, is really what kind of outreach can we do in that regard. I think that's a hugely important one, and I think that's probably especially hugely important at a time when we have seen community relations with municipalities, with police forces strained across the country in the last year. There's no reason that people should feel that any part of the government is inaccessible to them or aloof or has some mystery to it. There's no reason we should be any different in terms of our ability to make sure the message gets out there about what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Taylor, I wanted to give you the opportunity, maybe a short 1 minute or so closing statement. And again, appreciate you applying for this very important position, and thank you for your longstanding career in public service. But maybe a 1 minute closing statement to the full council.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. And let me reiterate that. Thank you for the opportunity. This court is an honor to be a part of, and it's an honor to be considered by you. You have read my application. You know about my background and my public service. Let me tell you a few things that I think are important to you that you wouldn't get from the application. My connections to this community are deep and they're long. My mother's family came to Arizona in early territorial days. My father's family got here in 1951. All right. I have 3 children who are all native Arizonans. I'm a family man. I've been married to the same wonderful woman for 25 years. She has put up with me for that long. She is a teacher in South Phoenix, and she grounds me where I need to be every single day. I grew up as the oldest of 7 kids in a working class family. I worked my way through college. I worked my way through law school. I have tried to teach my kids all of those things as being very important things as to who they are as we go forward. My career has been largely in public service. I have been fortunate to do some wonderful things on the international scene that very few people get to deal with. I consider myself and my children from that experience being citizens of the world, but we are Phoenicians by choice. This is where we came back. This is where we want to be as we go forward. Last thing I want to tell you about. one concern you haven't really asked, but that I would want to know if I was in your position, and that is it a disadvantage for me to be considered for the position of chief presiding judge even though I have not been a sitting judge? The answer to that is no. I will tell you that the skill set of being a chief presiding judge and the skill set of being a trial judge are very, very different. Presiding judges, especially in the Phoenix Municipal Court, where there is not a caseload, do not rule on objections. They don't listen to evidentiary motions or sentence people. They deal with budgets. They deal with personnel. They deal with processes and procedures and facilities management of the court every single day, day in and day out. The court is not a business, but running the court, make no mistake about it, is a business. And it has to be done with those skills and with that skill set. That, I would like to tell you, is precisely the skill set that I was honored to be able to develop over the last 3.5 to 4 years of doing it, learning much from Judge Song Ong. I believe those are the things that I bring to the table for this position, and I thank you for the time today.
Ms. Taylor, thank you very much for, again, going through this process, and back to the dungeon.
Thank you, sir.
And as I mentioned, there are a few cards of citizens wishing to provide comment on the applicant. So I think before we go into executive session, it would be appropriate that we hear from the community. I was remiss earlier when we took public comment on the process that there were many cards not wishing to speak, but wishing to express the desire that we move forward with the process that we did today in terms of interviewing the applicants. And I'll make sure there are about 8 or 9 cards in favor of moving forward. I'll make sure that they get entered for the record. Is Mr. Taylor securely away? Is he at a secure location? Okay. The first card that I will take is Gordon Griller. I hope I pronounced that correctly. National Center for State Courts from Denver, Colorado. If you're here, are you here? Please come forward to the microphones to my right, your left, followed by Judge Gilbert Figueroa, followed by the Honorable Gloria Ibarra.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm here on behalf of Don Taylor and his candidacy for the Chief Presiding Judge. I've known Don since he became the administrator of the court 4 years ago, and I feel my background is relevant to at least indicate to you some of the things that I feel Don brings. My particular perspective on presiding judges and court executives has accumulated over the course of about 40 years in court administration in a variety of positions. Currently, I'm the director of trial court leadership programs and a principal court management consultant with the National Center for State Courts. It's a public benefit corporation, and it is headquartered in Williamsburg, Virginia, dedicated to improving courts nationwide and around the world. I officially office in Denver, although I live in Scottsdale. I've taught and consulted with hundreds of courts and managed the municipal court and the district court in Minneapolis and St. Paul for 19 years, and the Superior Court here in Maricopa County for 16 years. So I am able to make some remarks, I think, about Mr. Taylor's qualifications. First, I'm very familiar with Don's capabilities and the work of your municipal court. I brought with me today the 2012 document that we did, the study that was on the municipal court and your justice system. And that particular study took 9 months. We reviewed the court and its justice system, and we concluded that it functioned exceedingly well. This was in the wake of the recession, which prompted a number of changes made by Don and by Chief Judge Roxanne Song Ong, consolidating back office functions, merging divisions and departments, flattening the organization, advancing online customer services, cross-training the staff, and re-engineering business processes. Don, along with Judge Roxanne Song Ong were the prime movers in guiding and implementing these changes. They not only were creative in doing so, but they were able to do so without increasing trial court delay, limiting public access, or causing staff upheaval. The job of both the chief presiding judge and court administrator in a large urban limited jurisdiction court like yours is principally management and administration. Don demonstrated those skills in those trying times and has continued to do so in the present. Secondly, I have found Don to be an adept leader. He has the ability to maximize participation, teamwork, and collaborative problem solving within the court, among its judges and the court staff, as well as special task forces. Lastly, Don has worked at the highest management and policy levels in the court and is the best positioned to continue the traditions and operations of your fine court. In our 2012 report, we found some very enviable services and systems and processes implemented by the court that are basic to its reputation as an urban city court that works much better than most. I base that on an assessment of a detailed understanding of numerous large metropolitan courts, including such cities as Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, Newark, and Anchorage. So with that background, I certainly would recommend to you, the City Council, Mr. Mayor, that Don be the successful candidate.
Thank you very much for your time and testimony. The next speaker will be Judge Gilberto Figueroa. I appreciate your testimony. Try to limit it as best as possible to 2 minutes. So when you hear the beep, that means you're at the 2-minute point, and to the best of your ability, wrap up. Good to see you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. I did have about 17 pages of notes, but since you've limited me to 2 minutes, I'll stop.
Those notes can be submitted for the record.
I'm kidding, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I don't think there's much I can say in support of Judge Olson's candidacy that you haven't already heard, but I'd like to highlight a couple of points, if I may. Number one, I've known Judge Olson for about 25 years. I met him when he first started in the county attorney's office, in Pinal County Attorney's Office, in about 1990. Shortly after he started in that office, his assignments grew not just in the degree of complexity of the work that he was doing, but in the management of the office that he was handling. Shortly after that, in 1993, I had the good fortune of the people of Pinal County electing me county attorney, and I came into Pinal County Attorney's Office, frankly, into a mess. My predecessor refused to allow me to come into the office after my election so that I could start getting used to what was going on. Judge Olson took it upon himself, who was then an administrative deputy, to bring me into the office, well, to bring himself into my office, my private office, to start sharing with me some of the things that I would be taking care of. I want to let you know that I came into that office midterm. In other words, the budget wasn't, I came in January where half of the budget was already gone. My predecessor had spent a lot of the money that was discretionary and left me in bad financial shape. Judge Olson, I appointed Judge Olson my administrative deputy, and he and I sat for many hours with him explaining to me where the budget shortfalls were and how we were going to take care of those. We were successful in doing that. I share these thoughts with you solely to let you know of the high integrity and high ethical standards that Judge Olson represents on the bench. He quickly rose through my administration from administrative deputy to chief deputy, and his work became even more pronounced and more secure for my office. He created our budgets. He dealt with our budgets. He talked about the Community Justice Network, and I bring that up solely to bring to the fore that he's not only a top-notch judge, but he's also a top-notch administrator, and he recognizes the needs of the community, goes out and takes care of them. One of the things that he didn't mention when he mentioned that was that one of the agencies that he concentrated on was the elderly and the elderly abuse issues that came up with that. He has a very strong financial background. In fact, he served as the chair of the State of Arizona Pension Fund for 5 years and was instrumental in recreating and resetting the governance of that agency. And in fact, I believe, and I submit to you, that if you look at the records, he helped save that agency from total bankruptcy. I can't urge you any more strongly than the words I've used to consider Judge Olson's background administratively, and let me go back to something that I have here, and I want to make sure that I point this out. Number one,
please wrap up.
I know Judge Song-Hong very well. I don't think anybody can replace her. I don't think anybody can fill her shoes. She's a unique, special individual. But I will share this. Everybody who came forward today has said the same thing. You have 3 good candidates. You may criticize the process, but you have 3 very good candidates. I believe Judge Olson, and I submit to you, Judge Olson separates himself because he's got the judicial background, the administrative background, and the accounting background that will help you move forward. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Next speaker will be the Honorable Gloria Ibarra. Thank you, Ms. Ibarra. And let's see if we can break the trend and try to keep it to about 2 minutes.
All right, I'll try. Good evening at this point. Mayor Stanton, Vice Mayor Valenzuela, council members, it's my pleasure and honor to be here to speak on behalf of Judge Kevin Kane. And it's really an honor to be in front of you in a position where you're not evaluating me as whether or not you want me to be a judge again. But be that as it may, I am now retired. And I don't know if you recall, but I am a native Phoenician. Both my parents were retired city employees. I am actually 2nd generation Phoenician, 4th generation Arizonan. I care about this place. I love this city. It means a great deal to me. At one time, I believe my Gonzalez side of the family had the most firefighters on the City of Phoenix Fire Department, something we're all very proud of. And I want to just tell you, because of my past commitment to the city, this is the place where I retired from. This is the place I worked the longest, and I enjoyed immensely. I am enjoying, however, being retired. But I do miss the court. And I miss the court in large part because of Judge Song-Hong, Judge Kane, Judge Alice Wright, who's here, Pro Tem Judge Martha Ashburn, and a lot of my other colleagues on the bench who I know have made you all very proud. Now, Judge Kane, I have known for almost 20 years. I first came to know him because I was a member of that dreaded committee, the Judicial Selection Advisory Board, at one time, and had the fortune of participating in that process, sending many of the names of my colleagues forward. I came to know then Judge Kane as legal counsel to the court, to the JSAB staffing, and then eventually as a colleague. Is that the beep for me? No.
That is the beep, and so
okay.
in general, try to wrap it up.
All right,
I
will. And as a colleague, he is a most engaged, interested in everything that goes on in his court. He listens to the advice and counsel of others. He's easy to work with. He's a leader in our community already. He knows what to do as a judge and as a leader. And he has all of the attributes of these 3 candidates in one person. So I would urge that you send his, you get to vote, to select him as the presiding judge for the City of Phoenix Municipal Court. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Judge Ibarra. The next speaker will be Aaron Blocker-Rubin, followed by John Hudson. Good to see you. Up to 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Aaron Blocker-Rubin. I am the founder and CEO of one of the largest health charities in the state, which is Arizona Autism United. And Don Taylor is one of our volunteer board members. So I came to just say a few words on his behalf because he's been such an outstanding leader on our board and for our organization. You may not know that Don has a son with special needs, and so the cause is very personal to him. And I had all these nice things I wanted to say about him, but I don't know if I really need to because he pretty much exemplified all of them in his interview. The things that always stand out to me about Don are his integrity, his compassion, and his ability to communicate, not only in what he says, but in how he listens. And I think that you saw that with every single question you asked, how he considers it. And when he talks, he does not waste words. And I think that's what I love most about Don. I could listen to him for hours. I don't know the world of judges that well, but I imagine they have some strong opinions. I guess that's kind of the point of being a judge. So they're going to need your system needs someone that naturally inspires trust and respect. And I couldn't think of a better person than Dawn. For us, our organization, our mission is to make sure any family of a child with autism can get help. And to me, the mission of what you're doing is to make sure that residents of Phoenix are protected. And I think Dawn is absolutely the best candidate you could find. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming down and making that, giving that testimony. Next speaker will be John Hudson, followed by Allie Bones.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor. I come to before you as a citizen of Phoenix. I've been a citizen for 40 years, but I also have a job. I work as a presiding judge at one of the 5th largest municipalities in Maricopa County. So I can talk a little bit about what the job entails. I managed the court through a case management change, which has been talked about here. I managed the court for over 6 years, so I went through the economic downturn. I can tell you what it takes to be a presiding judge is when you come in, you got to change some of the policies because times have changed and technology has changed. You have to have the ability to have been in the position when you implement those changes. And that's something Judge Kevin Kane has done. Also, I want to point out a municipal court is very different than any other court you're going to experience. You have to interact with the council. You have to interact with other departments when you do budgeting, other department heads, and you have to interact with the public at an unprecedented level. On this court and every municipal court, your highest caseload is going to be civil. And most of those people are unrepresented. Most of the people are unrepresented in criminal. But I heard a lot of the conversation talk about lean toward criminal, but your biggest bang for the buck, the biggest effect you have is in the civil arena. And one of the things when you talk about that, the innovations that you do is how are you going to handle those people who come to your courtroom? And Judge Kane is someone who's talked about that and will be able to help you in that area. One of the questions asked by Councilwoman Gallego was about the unrepresented and the demeanor it takes. Judge Kane has that demeanor to interact with those people. And that's one of the differences you're going to see that you don't see in municipal court, any other court, is the unrepresented and the ability to soften the environment and let them make informed decisions. So I've come here and support Judge Kane. I just wanted to point out to you the differences that it takes to run a court of this size. I will point out finally the most dreaded words we hear in government work are good enough for government work. That's because the 80-20 rule. 80% of the work, whoever you put in this position, the court's going to function. You'll come in, you get a ticket, it will get paid, or you'll go have a hearing. And I'll just finish up, Mayor, Vice Mayor. But that 20%, that's where the innovation comes through. As a citizen of this great city, that's where I want the presiding judge to be, to live in that 20%, and Judge Kane will do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allie Bones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I appreciate your time and consideration of the candidates for presiding judge for the City of Phoenix today. I'm Allie Bones. I'm a resident of District 8, and I'm here as someone who has worked on the issue of violence against women for the last 15 years in Arizona and the Valley. And domestic violence has been brought up as an issue here in the interview process today. Over the last many years, I have had the pleasure to work with the City of Phoenix on numerous issues related to violence against women, including efforts to support a dedicated domestic violence prosecution unit, the implementation of a grant to provide supervised probation for first-time offenders, the creation of a grouping system used by law enforcement to ensure that truly dangerous offenders of domestic violence are taken seriously, and most recently with the creation and implementation of the Domestic Violence Roadmap to Excellence, in which I have been working on efforts through the Systems Reform Subcommittee, of which I am co-chair, at reforming the law enforcement, prosecutorial, and court responses to domestic violence, among other priorities. All throughout these efforts, it has been clear to me that a critical component to ensuring that systems respond appropriately and with care and consideration of the constituencies at hand is having good leadership. I understand that the process of selecting the next presiding judge for the City of Phoenix is a significant decision and that it hasn't been an easy process, but you are very fortunate to have 3 wonderful candidates. I'm here today to recommend that the council select Don Taylor to the position of Chief Presiding Judge. I've known Don since he was a prosecutor on domestic violence cases back in the early 2000s, and since coming back to Arizona as the Executive Court Administrator for the Phoenix City Court. He has a strong understanding of the administrative needs and functions of the court, and I believe he is in a strong position to lead it forward. Don understands the independent and impartial role of the court, yet also realizes that doesn't preclude the court from understanding the issues they are confronted with on a regular basis. Just like the court must understand the issues that they are confronted just like the court must understand and know the science behind DUIs, it is critical for the court to understand the dynamics of domestic violence and the role that the court can play in reducing domestic violence over time. Working with Don to implement the Domestic Violence Review hearings docket has shown that he understands the role the court has in working with those who have convicted of domestic violence offenses to ensure that they follow through with their sentences. Court safety has also been an issue that we've been able to address, and when we've heard instances of judicial officers not taking the utmost care in ensuring victim safety in court proceedings, Don has taken it upon himself to address those issues. The protocols that the City of Phoenix have adopted with regards to court safety meet best practices. It is important that when they aren't followed, that action is taken. I have always found Don to be responsive to these issues. I appreciate your consideration of my comments regarding the selection of Don Taylor as Chief Presiding Judge. Fairness, consideration, and a strong knowledge of administrative functioning of the state's largest municipal court make him the strongest candidate for this post. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bones. The next speaker will be Jeffrey Ferris. Did you provide testimony? And then followed by Craig Jennings.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jeffrey Los Ferns. I'm a native Arizonan. I go pre-border. Before the border was there, my ancestral family lands was Sonoran Desert. I'm a humanist, and I also call myself a cultural worker. I've been working with marginalized communities, people of color, and around social justice issues, both on the West Coast, national, and now locally. I'm here to support Judge Kane on many levels. I've been following this process from the beginning, one, because of my interest in inequities in systems, and second, because of the decision that and how this decision impacts the communities that I work with. I have to say that after living in San Francisco 17 years and moving back about 3 years ago, I was quite pleased to come into the downtown Phoenix area. One of the reasons I left Arizona was because of the issues that I was faced as a person of color and job opportunities. And then coming back here, I see a vibrant, thriving community in the arts, as well as people taking a stand on social inequities. I've had very deep philosophical and ethical discussions with Judge Kane around issues that impact the communities that I work with. And he's always been fair and just. And when he didn't have the answers, he came back to me with solutions, or he wanted more information, or how can he engage these communities to become more aware of what was going on in those communities. In my culture, when you stand with someone, it isn't because they're your friend, or it isn't because you are supporting them for superficial reasons. It's because they value your individual truth, and they can somehow look at your individual truth fitting into the collective truth, which is a community. Judge Kane has always been fair, just, kind, and his answers here further solidified my perspective that he is both a humanist and an administrator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Craig Jennings, you just provide testimony on behalf of Don Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. My name is Craig Jennings, and I'm the presiding judge of the Avondale City Court. I'm here to support Don Taylor for the Chief Presiding Judge position, and I would like to explain why. Don is known and well respected by presiding judges and court administrators across the state. Don has 9 years of practicing in your court every day as a prosecutor early in his career. Don has had a direct hand in the day-to-day operations of this court for the past 4 years as the executive court administrator. The experience Don has makes him uniquely qualified for this position. I want to highlight some of the numerous duties and activities of the Chief Presiding Judge. The Chief Presiding Judge works with and administers the budget on a daily basis, hires, coaches, and mentors employees on a daily basis, evaluates employees' performance on a daily basis, represents the judicial branch as an independent branch of government in meetings with members from the executive and legislative branches on a daily basis, evaluates the entire court's operations on a daily basis. You have one candidate that has been doing this for the past 4 years in your court. That's Don Taylor. Don has worked side by side with former Chief Presiding Judge Song Ong for the past 4 years, running the court on a daily basis. My job in the Avondale City Court requires me to balance my administrative duties while presiding in court every day. The duties for your Chief Presiding Judge are different, in that your Chief Presiding Judge is never on the bench hearing individual cases. There is simply no time for that. You have 25 associate judges to handle that matter. You have one of the largest municipal courts in the United States. Everyone looks to your court as an example. This job is exclusively administrative and is responsible for the overall court, running of the court on a daily basis. Don has taught court administration for the Arizona Supreme Court to judges and court administrators throughout this state. Your next Chief Presiding Judge needs to be a leader who knows the administrative responsibilities, challenges, and processes of your court. Your next Chief Presiding Judge needs to be a strong leader to represent you, the City of Phoenix, your court, and the entire judiciary. Your next presiding judge should be Don Taylor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Judge Jennings. I have no other cards wishing to speak, but I did want to note for the record that there are several cards in favor of a particular candidate not wishing to speak, in favor of Judge Kevin Kane, Mark Hansen, Nathan Kuntz, Melissa Rexine, Stacy Lewis, Ken Chevron, Edith Lucero, Sean Palmer. That one's unclear. It's just, I think, in favor of the process. I apologize. May not be in favor of Judge Kane. Patience Huntwork, Jim Atkinson, Scott Smith, Justin O'Connell, Judge Martha Ashburn, Kaylin Myers, Sam Reyes, Alfred Ganote, Barbara McBroke, I believe, I apologize, Judge Alice Wright, retired, Victor Correa, Bruce McGee, Joseph Livingston, Tracy Westerhausen, and Chris Campbell. Those are all the cards I have for today's testimony. Did anyone else wish to speak? With that, I'll turn it over to the Vice Mayor. Do you have a motion for executive session?
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any comments, members of the council? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? This council will now move downstairs into executive session, and as soon as the executive session is done, we'll come back into regular session and see if we have a motion on one of the candidates.